a bare-chested elder, who was dozens of feet tall, appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed. He was very familiar with this white-haired man with 2 lightning balls in his left hand. It was the elder he had seen at the God Refining Sect and the off-world battlefield. He was Void God's right emissary, and his void power had reached its peak. He was on par with White Ape, the Overlord Patriarch. If it was the previous Jian Wushuang, he would definitely run as far away as possible. However, now he was not afraid at all. Exhaling a breath of turbid air, Jian Wushuang pulled off his hood, revealing a face that even Void God's right emissary was familiar with. As expected, his eyes narrowed and he questioned, "It's you, Jian Wushuang? Didn't you escape? You actually dare to come here alone?" "I'm here to collect a debt," Jian Wushuang said coldly. "A blood debt. A blood debt." Void God's right emissary was stunned for a moment before he laughed. "You, a cowardly rat? Originally, I wanted to take your head and give it to Lord Void God as a chamber pot. But I didn't expect you to come and die instead. This will save me the trouble of looking for you." Ignoring the right emissary's insults, he reached out and slowly pulled out the Tarot Divine Sword. The emissary's eyes lit up. "Good, very good. I'll use your divine sword to cut off your head. We won't waste any time." 10 breaths, Jian Wushuang said coldly. The emissary's eyes narrowed and his monstrous void power instantly blocked all possible escape routes. At the same time, he punched out his right fist. A fist aura that could destroy stars smashed toward Jian Wushuang's face. In the first form of Sundering Stars, an even more powerful sword ray collided with the fist energy, easily negating his attack. The right emissary's eyes narrowed. This person, who was almost like an ant in his eyes, had actually neutralized his attack so easily. Feeling irritated, he threw the 2 huge lightning balls in his left hand at Jian Wushuang. The balls of lightning expanded in the wind, and a huge amount of lightning surrounded them. If one was hit by any one of them, even an invincible Supreme Realm warrior would die on the spot. Jian Wushuang did not dodge. He stood on the spot and only the Tarot Divine Sword in his hand moved forward. The 2 balls of lightning flew over, but in the instant they collided with the tip of the Tarot Divine Sword. They stopped. Then Jian Wushuang raised his arm and stabbed. The 2 lightning balls returned to where they came from. They even became more powerful. The right emissary's eyes narrowed and he subconsciously reached out to catch them. Immediately, a bloody mist exploded from his palm. With a muffled groan, he opened his palm, and he could see white bones. The 2 lightning balls had broken the skin on his palm. Ever since the first battle of the Great Catastrophe War, he had long forgotten what it felt like to be injured. Now, not only was his palm broken, but even the 2 lightning balls that he regarded as his life force were also destroyed. The humiliation and shame caused Void God's right emissary to go berserk. "Jian Wushuang, you're going to die without a burial ground. What pointless fury." Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and laughed. The Tarot Divine Sword returned to its sheath and he charged at the violent void power. The 3-meter-tall right emissary met his punch and spat out a breath of empty flames. The destructive aura easily tore the space apart. With his black robe billowing, Jian Wushuang stretched his palm forward without any fancy moves. It broke through the thick black flame and hit the black fist. The water tank-sized fist smashed into the right emissary's palm without any suspense. Jian Wushuang thought that this punch would cripple his foe, but such a scene did not appear. Instead, a proud smile was still hanging on right emissary's face. The ghostly figure quietly appeared in front of him, and at the same time, a scarlet gold divine pattern flashed. Swish! With a soft sound, a head separated from its body. Jian Wushuang held the right emissary's white hair with one hand, lifting the head. Boom! The headless body trembled slightly and then fell heavily to the bottom of the cabin. "My body! Where's my body?" Void God's right emissary shouted in fear. He wanted to escape but found that he only had a head left. Putting the head in front of him, Jian Wushuang said, "Now, do you still want to use my head as a chamber pot?" "No, I don't want to." The extreme fear of death pacified Void God's right emissary. "Jian Wushuang, Master Wushuang, Let me go. I promise I won't pursue what happened today. I will definitely plead for you in front of Lord Void God. Then, the divine power universe will leave you alone. With a flash of disgust in his eyes, Jian Wushuang threw the head in his hand into the star field. Before he could rejoice, a beam of divine light shot over and immediately destroyed the head. Void God's right emissary had died. Jian Wushuang strolled to the bottom of the cabin and saw an extremely familiar figure in a huge cage. Her white clothes were extremely dirty at this moment, and her hair bun that was initially tied up in a playful manner was also scattered, covering half of her face. Jian Wushuang endured the pain in his heart and cut off the cage with one strike. "Little girl," Jian Wushuang called out softly as he squatted. After calling out a few times, the frightened and numb little figure raised her head timidly and looked at Jian Wushuang with a pair of deer-like eyes. In an instant, tears poured out of the little Taoist girl's eyes, and a sad cry came from her little mouth. "It's you, terrible chess player!" the child cried in Jian Wushuang's arms. Sorrow welled up in Jian Wushuang's heart. This innocent little Taoist child, who seemed to have gathered the spiritual energy of heaven and earth as one, was in a miserable state. It made him think of the Fengtian patriarch, who had used his body to break through the natural barrier and save the divine power universe. With red eyes, Jian Wushuang muttered, "I'm sorry. I'm late. Terrible chess player. Where's my master? Quickly tell me where my master is. I want master to avenge me and beat these bad guys who bullied me." The child in his arms let out all the fear and pain in her heart. She had been serving the Fengtian patriarch since she was a child and was not tainted by anything in the world. Jian Wushuang was the only other person she had spoken to besides the Fengtian patriarch, so she naturally regarded him as her closest person. "Terrible chess player." Chu Ji stood up and looked at Jian Wushuang with her red eyes. She sobbed and said, "Tell me, where did master go? I miss him so much. Does he not want me anymore? If he finds me annoying, then I won't talk back to him. I'm scared, and I don't want to leave him again." Jian Wushuang's heart was in so much pain, but he could not tell her the truth. He could only say dejectedly, "Chu Ji, don't worry. With me around, no one will bully you from now on. Terrible chess player. I just want to hear the truth." A big tear rolled down her young face. "Is my master dead or alive?" Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang stopped looking at the child and said in a trembling voice, "He's dead." The girl was stunned and her eyes quickly lost their liveliness. Her body swayed slightly and she fell into Jian Wushuang's arms, fainting. Looking at the once carefree little fairy who had become like this, the sadness in his eyes faded away, and a monstrous killing intent rose into the starry sky. Jian Wushuang picked up the child and slowly rose into the sky. The other 4 cosmic boats surrounded him, and there were a total of 30 Void Masters there. "Palace Master Wushuang, let's go." Dao Yen and Ban Shan came over and looked at the 30-odd Void Masters with serious expressions. If they were in the divine power universe, Ban Shan could easily kill these Void Masters without even suffering a scratch. However, now that they were in the Void universe, Taoist Ban Shan could only exert 60 to 70% of his divine power at most, while Dao Yen was already extremely weak. If he did not have time to replenish his divine power, even his natal green lotus would be irreversibly damaged. He had no chance of winning against these 30 Void Masters. However, Jian Wushuang did not show any signs of weakness. The golden divine light in his eyes flowed along with the wind. "I'll pay you back with the blood of you bastards." The emotionless voice was like a divine punishment descending upon the world. With just one sentence it stated their ending. This relatively prosperous star field was quietly covered in a layer of misty frost, and all living beings below the 1 scar level almost instantly become ice sculptures. The 30 Void Masters were plunged into an ice age, and they all had a bad feeling at the same time. "What's going on? I feel like my bone marrow is freezing, and my void power is freezing. I knew it. Even the Void God's right emissary died at the hands of this brat. How could we kill him with just our numbers? Run!" After the noisy whispering, the 30 Void Masters scattered like birds, turning into black light ribbons and scattering in all directions. Then, none of the Void Masters managed to escape. The moment they turned around, they were turned into ice sculptures. The first form of the 4 seasons of the Tarot Sword Manual was no longer the same as before. It could kill anyone below the half-invincible Supreme Realm, let alone a group of Void Masters who were only at the 4-star level. Feeling the chill around him, Ban Shan could not help but tighten his robe. He began to realize that Jian Wushuang's growth had surpassed his knowledge. Supreme Dao Yen no longer looked at the frozen Void Masters. He stepped forward and looked at the thin figure in Jian Wushuang's arms. He could not help but feel his heart ache. "Is this the Fengtian Patriarch's little girl?" Dao Yen asked in a trembling voice. Jian Wushuang's eyes were as deep as he nodded. "She's just a child, and she suffered such a great loss. Void Universe, you all deserve to die." Dao Yan's tears fell, and his face was flushed with anger. "I really want to crush them one by one now." Ban Shan's face was livid. He smashed several frozen Void Masters with one punch. "What the Void Universe owes us will eventually be repaid in blood," Jian Wushuang said in a deep voice. The last trace of pity in his heart quickly disappeared. In the following period of time, everyone in the Void Universe had heard of an extremely powerful young ranger. This ranger wore a loose black robe, and he frightened more than half of the star fields in the Void Universe. Every time this nightmarish figure appeared in a star field, the entire Void country would be destroyed in less than half a day. From normal peasants to the 6-star Void Masters, no living creature survived. His vast power seemed to penetrate the heavens and earth. Even powerful 6-star patriarchs could not escape the fate of death. None of the forces knew what the mysterious ranger looked like, because those who had seen him had all disappeared with the stars. There were rumors from the Void country that the mysterious ranger was sent by the Divine Power Universe to take revenge, but it was quickly denied. There were also rumors from the Holy Land that the mysterious ranger was an apostle of the Void God. He failed to break through to the next cultivation realm and lost his mind, so he began to massacre people. When the great sects of the 5-star fields had made full preparations and asked their patriarchs to guard the area, they launched a coordinated attack. However, they failed in the end. The entire northernmost section of the Void Universe was wiped out. A total of 5 patriarchs who had reached the peak of the 6-star level and 100 Void Masters mysteriously disappeared overnight. It was as if the 5 bustling star fields had been forcibly wiped out from the starry sky, leaving only the dark void. No one knew what had happened that night. They could only silently pray that the person who was like a nightmare would quickly leave. In a desolate and cold star field, a cosmic boat that could only accommodate 5 people was traveling forward at an extremely fast speed. Jian Wushuang sat on the railing at the bow of the ship. The wind was blowing his black robe, making it flutter. The killing intent that he inadvertently revealed made him feel as if he had walked out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. 1 month, 27 star fields, 8 Void Masters in the 6-star level, and 23 Void Masters in the 5-star level are killed. Meanwhile, the casualties of those in other cultivation realms are uncountable. One by one, numbers emerged in his mind and quickly disappeared. Jian Wushuang's destructive power alone was extremely terrifying. With a wave of his hand, he could destroy an entire Void country in a star field. Even 6-star level Void Masters could only withstand a few moves from him. If it were not for the fact that he was about to leave the Void Universe, Jian Wushuang would have naturally massacred all the living forces in the various star fields. At the same time, he also felt strange that the Void Universe seemed to be strangely quiet. Other than some of the bustling star fields sending their Void Masters to the off-world battlefield, there was no other movement. The second-in-command of the Void Universe, Snake God, must have sensed Jian Wushuang's aura easily. However, he was nowhere to be found. Was it really because he was too low-key? Chu Ji, who had already changed into a white robe, woke up from her sleep. After a low cry, she quickly ran behind Jian Wushuang and tightly held onto the corner of his clothes. Jian Wushuang felt more pity for the child. Looking at the child who was like a frightened bird, he seemed to be reminded of the eccentric Fengtian patriarch. He thought about the old man who was concerned about the divine power universe. Jian Wushuang jumped down from the railing and used his divine power to comfort the child. Like a startled bird, Chu Ji slowly calmed down, but she refused to let go. Those 27 star fields, those void masters, as well as the void god's right emissary, they all paid the price for doing this to Chu Ji. Ever since she found out that the Fengtian patriarch had passed away, she had sat in a daze for 7 days. It was as if her soul had been drawn away, and she had lost all faith and reliance. Even Supreme Dao Yen could not cheer her up. In the end, it was Jian Wushuang's words that woke her up from her meditation. The moment she left the Holy Land, she experienced the extreme evil of the universe. This was fatal to an extremely naive child. The only thing Jian Wushuang could do now was to help her let go. "We'll reach the crack in a day at most," Jian Wushuang said. "But I think the crack should be more tightly guarded. I'm afraid those guys are already waiting for us there." Even if there were 20 Void Masters who are in the 6-star level guarding the crack, Jian Wushuang was confident that he could protect Dao Yen and Ban Shan until they reached the divine power universe. However, Shi Zhuji and Snake God were his biggest concerns. Without a perfect plan, Jian Wushuang would never let have free roam. "I'll go first. You guys wait in the nearby star field. If I'm free, I'll come and pick you up. If I can't come back in 7 days, Elder Dao Yen, you guys can hide and wait until the crack weakens before you break out," Jian Wushuang said. Ban Shan was about to speak when Dao Yen reached out to stop him. He said, "We'll listen to Palace Master Wushuang's orders. Even if we go together, we'll only cause trouble for Palace Master Wushuang." Jian Wushuang nodded. Just as he was about to leave, Chu Ji pulled on the corner of his clothes and said timidly, "You terrible chess player. Don't leave me behind." Jian Wushuang rubbed her hair and said, "Wait for me for 2 days. I'll come back to pick you up in 2 days at most." Chu Ji gritted her teeth and then released her grip. "Terrible chess player. Besides Master, you're the only one I know. Don't leave me behind." Jian Wushuang felt sad. After making the promise, he rushed into the crack. A year might be long for ordinary living beings, but for cultivators, it was almost like the blink of an eye. Jian Wushuang gambled that Snake God and the others did not strengthen their arrangements and went to the 23 cracks again. As soon as he stepped into the enchantment around the crack, a thick aura of death hit him in the face. He was slightly stunned. The corpses of the Void Masters he had killed were still scattered in the void, and their positions had not even changed. Other than that, there was no other aura of a living person. Could it be that no one had made any arrangements in the past year, and no one knew what had happened here? Jian Wushuang could not believe that none of the Void Masters on duty had noticed the situation. With Snake God's suspicious and treacherous nature, it was impossible for him not to be guarding this place. Could it be that they were not in the Void Universe? Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang was overjoyed and was about to test the waters. Jian Wushuang was shocked and immediately released his divine power to create a formation. In the next moment, the boundary of the crack suddenly burst open, and a bloody figure jumped into the void universe. Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed. Snake God! At this moment, Snake God's black robe had been torn to shreds. His exposed skin and scales seemed to have been peeled off by a great force, revealing his dark gray skin and flesh. Of the 9 heads that represented Snake God, only 2 were left. It seemed that the wounds on the broken neck had just recovered. Snake God, who seemed to be on the verge of death, could not help but tremble when he saw Jian Wushuang. His vertical pupils turned gray. "It's you, Jian Wushuang?" Jian Wushuang did not speak, but he released his aura, which expressed his hostile attitude. Sensing his gradually rising terrifying aura, Snake God suppressed the uneasiness in his heart and said in a deep voice, "Why are you here? Get lost, or I don't mind killing you on the spot." "Oh?" "With your current strength." The divine pattern was brilliant and appeared on Jian Wushuang's black robe. He looked at Snake God with a cold smile and said, "Why don't you give it a try now?" After sensing the change in his aura, Snake God's face turned ashen. "How could you?" Jian Wushuang knew how to take advantage of a person's misfortunes. He immediately pulled out the Tarot Divine Sword and immediately released the 5th move of the Tarot Sword Manual. A giant phantom of tarot condensed in the sky. Unlike before, a huge sun appeared above the tip of the phantom. It was divine and magnificent. Looking at the sword intent coming at him, Snake God, who was almost out of energy, could no longer pretend. He roared, "Jian Wushuang, you can't kill me. Once I die, all the secrets will disappear, including the news of your master, Xianxia." Jian Wushuang's heart trembled, and the giant tarot phantom image tilted to the side, almost brushing past Snake God as the attack fell. Boundless sword intent surged and tore apart the starry sky. Snake God was a little slow, and he could not move away in time. His entire left arm was shattered by the sword intent. Jian Wushuang reached out and grabbed Snake God's blood-drenched body, pulling Snake God in front of him. Jian Wushuang's eyes were as deep as water. "Tell me all the secrets you know and I'll spare your life." Snake God's ugly face was twisted due to the intense pain, making it even uglier. With a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth, Snake God said with resentment and jealousy, "It has only been 10,000 years, but you have grown to such a terrifying level. Jian Wushuang, what kind of monster are you?" Jian Wushuang tightened his grip on Snake God's neck and said, "Don't keep me in suspense. As long as I exert force, you will die." Hearing this, Snake God laughed strangely. "If you kill me, someone else will replace me soon. Jian Wushuang, can you kill them all? If you kill me now, I guarantee that you won't even be able to leave the void universe." Jian Wushuang's heart trembled. Just as he was about to kill Snake God with a palm strike, Snake God suddenly said, "There are forces behind me that even I don't dare offend. Even if you're able to fight against me now, will you be able to deal with a few guys who are as strong as me? You're looking for death." Jian Wushuang shouted and exerted force in his palm. Snake God's throat let out a hissing sound. "Listen to me. Do as I say and head to the Polar Sea. I guarantee you will be safe." Just as Jian Wushuang was about to speak, a strong aura began to spread from the void crack. "They're already here. If you don't do as I say, we'll both die here." Snake God slowly closed his eyes and no longer spoke. Feeling the terrifying aura getting closer and closer, Jian Wushuang gritted his teeth and dragged Snake God, who was like a dead dog, into the depths of the void universe behind him. When the two of them completely disappeared, the 23 crack enchantments were torn apart. Several figures with vast void energy around them appeared. Why is there the presence of divine power here? Could it be that Snake God is already dead? If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse. I can't let him live. Yes, sir. In a desolate, cold, and silent star field, there was no aura of any living being. A cosmic boat was jumping and shuttling back and forth. On the deck, Snake God, who was bound tightly by divine chains as thick as his calves, was panting heavily. Dao Yen and Ban Shan looked as if they were facing a great enemy. "Palace Master Wushuang, why did you bring him here?" Ban Shan Daoist looked anxious. "Why don't we kill this person right now to avoid any unexpected changes? I say, little guy, as fate would have it, we've at least met once. Do you really want me to die so badly?" Snake God's remaining two heads faced Ban Shan, and both had strange expressions on them. The divine power turned into a ribbon and covered Snake God's mouth. Then, Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly and roughly told them what had happened. After listening, Dao Yen frowned and slowly walked to Snake God. He asked, "You know about Xianxia?" Jian Wushuang waved his hand to remove the divine power from Snake God's mouth. Snake God laughed evilly and said, "Of course I know, but I can't tell you now. This is my trump card. When I am out of danger, I will tell you. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you right now?" Jian Wushuang said coldly. Snake God's ugly face trembled, and then he smiled sinisterly. "Of course I'm afraid, but if you kill me now, I guarantee that none of you will be able to live safely. Only if I'm alive will you be able to reach a safe place. If you dare to play any tricks, I don't mind taking you down with me before I die. Don't worry, I treasure my life very much. I won't make things difficult for myself. No one spoke. A cloud of gloom hung over Jian Wushuang's mind. In order to prevent Chu Ji from reacting when she saw Snake God, Jian Wushuang used his divine power to put Chu Ji into a deep sleep. For 7 consecutive days, according to the route given by Snake God, the cosmic boat had long deviated from the normal star field. As far as the eye could see, the starry sky had turned from crystal blue to extremely dark and turbid. At the same time, a pitch-black ocean floated in the starry sky, flowing into the depths of the universe. Whoosh! This was a continent that grew on a pitch-black sea. There was no sun, and the sky was always the chaotic color of dusk. The universe boat was stranded on the gray soil, and the dying snake god was hung on the bow of the ship. Hurry! Throw me into the sea. Snake god's eyes were bloodshot as he looked at the pitch-black sea. Jian Wushuang ignored him and continued to explore the strange land that grew on the huge sea with Dao Yen. Jian Wushuang waved his hand and took a handful of black water from the sea. The strange energy immediately boiled in his hand. What is this power? Jian Wushuang's eyes widened as he looked at the boiling black water in his palm. It's neither divine power nor void power? It really isn't divine power or void power. This is strange. How can a place like this produce another kind of energy? Ban Shan clicked his tongue in wonder. Jian Wushuang looked at the bow of cosmic boat subconsciously, only to realize that Snake God had disappeared. Jian Wushuang's heart sank and he immediately released vast divine power. Seeing this, Dao Yen and Ban Shan also released their own divine power. Hee hee. A muffled and strange laugh resounded from the deck of cosmic boat. Snake God, whose lower body had transformed into a snake, appeared in front of everyone with Chu Ji in one hand. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang's blood boiled and his eyes turned red. You beast! How dare you! Snake God ignored his rage and said sinisterly, Release the shackles on my body, or I will kill her immediately and make her Dao disappear. Chu Ji cried out in pain, her neck already bruised. Jian Wushuang suppressed the urge to tear him into pieces and said very slowly, Sure, but if you dare to hurt her again, I promise you that I will destroy your body and soul. Snake God's pupils narrowed, and his gradually tightening palm slowly loosened. At this critical moment, Chu Ji suddenly took out a piece of copper from her arms and smashed it at Snake God's head. A miserable shriek rang out, and Snake God let go of Chu Ji in pain. Jian Wushuang saw this and threw the Tarot Divine Sword. The Divine Sword expanded in the wind and cut off one of Snake God's heads. Like a long rainbow, Jian Wushuang swept toward the cosmic boat and punched Snake God's last head heavily, causing blood to splatter. Don't kill me. If you kill me, all the secrets you want to know will disappear. Snake God was no longer as sinister as before. The fear of death forced him to beg for mercy. Jian Wushuang punched him again. He grabbed his neck and lifted him up. Tell me. If you don't tell me a secret that satisfies me, I'll kill you immediately. I'll tell you everything. Snake God nodded and said in a sad voice, For example, the polar sea in front of us. It's not something that is formed from 2 of our universes. It was formed by an accident and fell from an unknown place. Jian Wushuang sneered and said, What kind of secret is this? Do you really want to die? Snake God shook his head and said, Do you really think that the divine power universe and the void universe are the ultimate realms? Jian Wushuang was stunned. Continue. I don't know. I don't know anything. That kind of existence is not something I can come into contact with. Snake God regained his composure, and there were all kinds of indescribable emotions in his vertical pupils. What I know is only my guess, but you should be able to boldly imagine the ultimate end of all these things. Jian Wushuang did not ask any more questions. After adding dozens of restrictions on Snake God, he casually threw him on the deck. After that, Jian Wushuang quickly came to Chu Ji, who was hiding at the side. Little girl, are you okay? With a pair of bloodshot eyes, Chu Ji shook her head hard and then raised the copper lump in her hand. Terrible chess player, you saved me. You gave this thing to my master in the past. Now, I'm returning it to you. The copper lump was none other than the Chaos Wushu cauldron that Jian Wushuang had exchanged for with Feng Tian Patriarch in the Southern Ocean Immortal Island. Feeling the familiar aura from the cauldron, Jian Wushuang shook his head gently and gave it back to her. This cauldron isn't of much use to me, so I'll leave it with you for self-defense. When Chu Ji heard this, she shook her head stubbornly. No, Master said that I have to hand it to you personally. This cauldron will be of great use to you in the future. She paused for a moment before continuing. I don't need the protection of this cauldron. You said that you would definitely protect me. Jian Wushuang did not say much. Finally, he put the cauldron in her hand and closed it. Even if he had gathered all the 5 Qi essence, the Chaos Wushu cauldron was not of much use to Jian Wushuang. That was because even with his current knowledge, he could not understand much of it. Rather than keeping it by his side, it was better to keep it by Chu Ji's side in case of danger. Judging from the results of her strike on Snake God, it seemed that Chaos Wushu Cauldron's effect was not bad. After comforting the Chu Ji, Jian Wushuang came to Dao Yan and said in a serious voice, Senior brother Dao Yan, Elder Ban Shan, what do you think of what that guy said just now? In order to prevent Snake God from eavesdropping, Jian Wushuang wrapped the area with divine power. Dao Yan muttered to himself for a while and finally shook his head. It's incredible. I can't imagine what other existences exist besides the divine power universe and the void universe. In my opinion, even as 2 sides of the universe, the 2 universes are the ultimate existences of all things. Ban Shan nodded in agreement. His thoughts were the same as Dao Yan's. The universe of divine power was too vast. It almost included all the realms and the realm limits of all living beings. Even if the universe reincarnated, it was just another new cycle of the universe. Could there be another universe besides the divine power universe and the void universe? Dao Yan was born at the beginning of the universe in chaos, so his insight would affect Jian Wushuang's judgment. Jian Wushuang was naturally willing to believe that the 2 universes were the ultimate form of everything, but he felt that Snake God's words just now were not plain nonsense. He should have glimpsed some ancient relic civilization or heard something that he should not have heard. Jian Wushuang looked into the distance. The polar sea was deep, and there were no waves on its endless surface. It was like a black mirror that had existed since ancient times. How was the polar sea formed? It dominated the starry sky but did not merge with the void universe and existed independently. It was incredible. Jian Wushuang stretched out his hand to disperse the divine power on Snake God's head. Then he carried him and swept toward the edge of the polar sea. Snake God, who was on the verge of death, became agitated when it sensed that it was approaching the polar sea. Put me into the sea. Jian Wushuang did not speak. Instead, he stopped at the shore of the polar sea and stretched out his hand to hold Snake God in the air. Let me down, let me down. Snake God struggled uneasily. With a wave of his hand, he scooped up a handful of pitch-black seawater, and that strange fluctuating energy aura spread out again. After thinking for a while, Jian Wushuang poured the black water on Snake God's broken arm. The black water seemed to have its own consciousness. Like a wriggling snake, it entered the wound instantly. Instantly, countless tiny black meat tendrils grew out and built up with each other. It was even faster than the reconstruction of a divine body. Jian Wushuang's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. He reached out and cut off the growth of meat tendrils. Ignoring Snake God's angry roar, Jian Wushuang threw Snake God on the shore and said calmly, Of course, I can allow you to enter the polar sea. Before that, expose your life source to me and let me plant a restriction in it. You're dreaming. You're really a vicious child. Snake God gritted his teeth and stared at Jian Wushuang with hatred. With a cold smile, Jian Wushuang lifted his foot and kicked Snake God far away. At the same time, dozens of brilliant divine powers turned into a divine power cage and trapped Snake God in the formation. Don't try to break through. You won't be able to survive 10 breaths of divine punishment with your current strength. Jian Wushuang reminded him, and then flew straight into the endless polar sea. Snake God's eyes narrowed and his eyes were filled with hatred. Jian Wushuang, I curse you to lose your divine soul in the polar sea and sink into oblivion forever. The moment Jian Wushuang stepped into the area of the polar sea, a special aura of a restriction caused discomfort to the divine power in Jian Wushuang's body. The aura of the restriction seemed to carry the chaos and savagery of primitive times. At the same time, it was a profound suppression from the level of life, which made Jian Wushuang feel uncomfortable. After setting up a defense to fortify his consciousness and pure heart, Jian Wushuang dispelled the strange feeling and continued to rise above the polar sea. He had an inexplicable intuition that something in this polar sea seemed to be calling him. The dark and boundless sea was like a deep mirror. Even Jian Wushuang would feel dizzy when he looked at the sea occasionally. In order to prevent getting lost, Jian Wushuang set up a divine power cage around Snake God so that he could feel the distance from the shore at any time. However, Jian Wushuang felt the divine power aura that he had left on the shore rushing towards him at an extremely fast speed. Jian Wushuang's heart tightened. The bad feeling finally came. On the strangely still surface of the polar sea, a dark light beam sped over. Before it could be seen clearly, a strong light rose from the sky and aimed at Jian Wushuang. Buzz! The divine patterns emerged and the vast divine power turned into a light wall that appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. The two collided. As the black light was destroyed, it also shattered the light wall. Jian Wushuang frowned. He found that it was Snake God who had launched such a fierce attack. He saw that Snake God's severed arm had grown back. Initially, he only had one head left, but now there were 8 heads. Black mist gushed out of every inch of Snake God's pores. The 9 pairs of vertical pupils glowed with an evil red light, and they looked at Jian Wushuang without any emotion. Jian Wushuang did not dare to act rashly because of the power of a peak half-ancestor realm warrior. Although he knew that he could fight a half-ancestor without losing, that was under the condition that he used ancestral skills. To Jian Wushuang, the current situation was a great disadvantage. He did not understand how Snake God had managed to return to his peak in such a short time and lock onto his position. Snake God had a strange face, and he smiled sinisterly. All 9 of his mouths opened at the same time as he said, "Jian Wushuang, don't hold back the most taboo existence in the depths of your heart. Let it out. This is the world of bliss. Don't you like to kill too? There are many people you killed here." Jian Wushuang frowned. Just as he was about to release his divine power, he saw the mirror-like polar sea below him suddenly boil. Figures covered in thick ink like mucus slowly appeared. "Jian Wushuang, give me back my life." With a shrill voice, Supreme Bing Yi, who was emitting black mist from his body, rushed over with great power. Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed, but he quickly calmed down. He snorted coldly, "You're resorting to using illusions now? I can kill you once, so what's the harm in killing you a second time?" As Bing Yi took the lead in the charge, the figures that had died at Jian Wushuang's hands emerged one by one. "You were a piece of trash when you were alive, and you're still trash after you're dead, right?" A monstrous battle intent soared into the sky, and countless scarlet golden divine patterns appeared around his body. The sword intent transformed from his divine power was like a raging river, crushing the illusions of Supreme Master Bing Yi and the others into pieces. Heaven and earth were crying, and strange sounds shot up to the 9 heavens. Everything disappeared like a demon. Jian Wushuang waved his hand to disperse the black smoke in front of him and snorted coldly. "Petty tricks." Snake God, who was standing in the distance, laughed evilly. "Jian Wushuang, I will never let a monster like you live in this world. You will sink into the void." As soon as he finished speaking, a huge phantom appeared. It looked like a giant version of Snake God. The 9 snake heads that almost tore the sky apart were like 9 suns. Jian Wushuang did not want to be outdone either. He turned his palm into a fist and the brilliant divine patterns came out of his body. He formed a magnificent heavenly divine gate in the dark sky. The roar reached the heavens and the earth, and even the calm polar sea was shaken and rippled. In the next moment, the 9 great sun snake heads tore the sky apart easily and crashed toward Jian Wushuang with endless power. The vast heavenly divine gate opened, and a giant finger that reached the sky also fell heavily. Different from before, another giant finger descended. The first snake head that reached out collided with the giant finger, following which, an immense aftershock burst out. It had so much power that it was enough to kill any star field. The mirror-like polar sea was completely turbulent, and the huge waves as high as the sky were about to swallow even the broken sky. Jian Wushuang retreated 1,000 feet and divine blood gushed out from his ears and nose. He crushed one of Snake God's heads with a single finger, and the two vast powers that could not be contained were completely crushed together. The sky was shattered instantly, and all the stars were destroyed. The space crack extended for millions of miles. On the shore of the polar sea, Dao Yen and Ban Shan, who were sitting in the universe boat, opened their eyes at the same time. They hurried to the bow of the boat and looked at the depths of the extreme sea. The sky was already shattered, and the stars were destroyed. The starry sky was forcibly wiped out, and the violent squall unique to the void poured into the region of the extreme sea. It was a scene of world destruction. Palace Master Wushuang, I'm afraid we're in danger. Dao Yen frowned and looked into the distance. What should we do? Should we go and help Palace Master Wushuang? Taoist Ban Shan said. Let's wait a little longer. We're under the void universe's restrictions. We'll only cause more trouble if we go. Dao Yen shook his head. Snake God, who was trapped in the divine power cage, was still curled up in the cage. His body was covered in blood, and there was no sign of recovery. He also sensed the destructive aura coming from the depths of the polar sea, and his gloomy vertical pupils looked into the distance without moving. It's really strange. Why do I hope that he can pass? Damn it! Damn it! The heavenly gate above the broken sky had dimmed. After killing 6 snake heads in a row, Jian Wushuang was about to reach the point of exhaustion. The black mist around Snake God had also completely dissipated. Jian Wushuang, you deserve to die. The phantom form of the giant snake god with only 3 snake heads let out a deafening roar. After I kill you, all the living creatures in the divine power universe will be swallowed into my stomach, and they will be consigned to eternal damnation. He. Jian Wushuang's anger was instantly ignited and he felt his heart burning. The extreme darkness of Heaven Gate that had destroyed the Void God's true shadow had arrived again. Countless divine rays emerged, and tens of thousands of divine weapons and precious forms crushed the phantom snake god with divine might. In just an instant, it was as if thousands of suns had exploded at the same time. Under the illumination of the bright light, the phantom snake god was as small as a drop in the ocean. Like a drop of water under the red sun, the huge phantom image was completely destroyed. The heavenly gate that was hanging in the broken sky dispersed at the same time. Turning into star patterns and returning to Jian Wushuang's body, he coughed and wiped the divine blood from the corner of his mouth with his sleeve. The brilliant divine power of the extreme day dissipated, leaving only a faint layer of black ash where Snake God was, which dissipated with the wind. So he's finally dead. Snake God disappeared, but Jian Wushuang felt that something was wrong. In the next moment, the black ash that was about to scatter suddenly condensed. A figure that Jian Wushuang did not want to see the most and was even helpless against had descended. Void God! Jian Wushuang's body trembled and he felt bitter. The materialized figure was the peak of the void universe, and his sky-breaking palm strike was enough to kill any invincible supreme warrior. It was a nightmare that Jian Wushuang still did not want to face. His return would mean that the divine power universe would enter the countdown of complete destruction. No, it can't be him. How could he have returned from the seal of Cosmos God so quickly? This is all an illusion. An illusion. Jian Wushuang shook his head hard, as if he wanted to dispel the figure from his mind. The terrifying figure hidden in the black fog surged with peak void power and looked at Jian Wushuang with 2 pairs of red eyes without any emotion. I said that we would meet again. Jian Wushuang's body trembled. In the face of such an ancestor realm existence, he knew that any attempt to escape would be futile. Like a burning black flame, Void God created a scroll in the sky with a wave of his hand. In the majestic scroll, He could see countless star fields and divine kingdoms which were destroyed by the Void Masters. Countless living beings were easily killed in this great catastrophe. From mortals to invincible supremes, they had all died in a pool of blood. Jian Wushuang saw his descendants being slaughtered by a Void Master in the 6th scar level, Leng Rushuang falling into a mountain stream, and Supreme Junfu's head being cut off by his own axe. The cold 9th Kulpa King finally died on the battlefield. Everything was covered in blood. No, don't. Jian Wushuang had completely fallen into madness. How could you be one step ahead of me? The phantom-like void god's body flickered like mist, and a deep voice came out of his mouth. Submit to me. I promise you that you and your loved ones will continue to live and enjoy the glory of the past. His long hair, which had been cut off, danced wildly in the air. The divine patterns that had already dimmed expanded once again, and a brilliant divine might rose to the sky. Jian Wushuang had gone completely mad. His eyes were bloodshot and an invisible long sword slowly formed in his right hand. All of you, just wait for me. Jian Wushuang's last words came out of his mouth. He raised the invisible sword formed by the divine patterns in his hand and turned his body into Tao. Galaxy Lake Sea Sword Intent, first move star. The polar sea was completely turbulent, and the huge waves that rose from the sky completely fused with the broken sky. The starlight seemed to have been born in ancient times. With the shapeless body of the sword, the divine power condensed into the hilt, the long wind condensed into the blade, and the divine patterns were injected into it. The sword path itself was formed. The most ordinary yet most magnificent strike was completely released with his ultimate sword Tao. The heavens and earth were clear, and the divine might was majestic. You guys, wait for me. I'll be there to accompany you soon. Jian Wushuang slashed forward, and a mournful aura that had never been seen before shot up into the sky. The illusionary sword transformed into a huge sword intent that soared into the sky. After easily breaking the restrictions of the starry sky, it descended. With Void God as the center, the polar sea was split by the sword intent from the middle into a deep chasm, and the surging seawater covered everything. Brilliant divine patterns shot up into the sky, forming countless pillars of light that exploded. This sword intent would quickly destroy any other aura it came into contact with. Void God was still standing there. He was like a shadow that was gradually disappearing. Only the pair of red eyes disappeared the moment his body disappeared. At this moment, the sky, earth, stars, and polar sea were all in chaos. Jian Wushuang, whose divine power had been completely drained, had the divine patterns all over his body crack and his eyes lost their light. Then, his body fell straight into the abyss of the polar sea. In the chasm that was split apart by the sword intent of the Galaxy Lake Sea Sword Intent, countless streams of water suddenly rose up like dragons, forming a huge black virtual image. Jian Wushuang's falling body finally landed in the palm of the huge black phantom. A drop of crystal clear water fell from the eye of the phantom and landed on Jian Wushuang's forehead. On the shore of the polar sea, all the mountains and land shook, and the deep cracks opened up the mountains. Dao Yan, who was standing at the head of Cosmic Boat, trembled. After exchanging a glance with Ban Shan, he was ready to rush to Jian Wushuang's aid. Due to the surging of the polar sea, violent waves poured directly on the shore, almost drowning half of the divine power cage. Snake God, who was on the verge of death, was overjoyed when he felt the black water flowing around him. The heavens are helping me. Pure black scales regrew, and the severed arm and the 8 heads that had been cut off were also growing at an extremely fast speed. At this moment, a sudden change occurred. The sky that was originally broken suddenly rippled. A total of 3 figures walked out. If Jian Wushuang was there, he would definitely recognize the 3 figures. The first one to walk out was Devour One, who was hidden in the black mist and only revealed a red eye. Then, Devour Two walked out together with the God-refining sect's previous sect master, Void Master Ba Huang. Supreme Dao Yen and Taoist Ban Shan, who had yet to move, stopped when they saw this scene, and bitterness appeared in their eyes. Snake God, who was frantically absorbing the black water, was scared out of its wits when he saw the three figures. Devour One, who was the leader, glanced at Dao Yen first, then glanced at Snake God, who was bound by divine power. He's there. Go and absorb him. You'll be able to stabilize your half-ancestor realm completely, Devour One said in an indifferent tone. Void Master Ba Huang acknowledged respectfully and walked out slowly. He had a terrifying aura that surpassed the 6-scar level. Void Master Ba Huang was intoxicated by the mysterious and special state. Everything was given to me by Lord Devour, and it's time for me to repay him. Where am I? Is this the world after death? In the broken sky, countless squalls raged, and the stars that had been shattered into powder spread out, which was extremely mysterious. Just as Jian Wushuang was in a daze, a low voice resounded. Hey kid, you've woken up. Are you still going to continue playing dead? Jian Wushuang jumped up with a sudden jolt. He looked over and saw a shadow in a rippling black water robe emerging from the endless dark water surface and finally standing in front of Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang subconsciously took a step back, but he hit a wet object. Then, 10, 100, 1,000 figures, which were still dripping with water, reached out their palms and pushed Jian Wushuang toward the mysterious black shadow. Gulp! Jian Wushuang swallowed a few times. He did not know when his meridians had been filled with divine power, but he could not use any of it. Don't try to use those moves on me. Although they're gorgeous, they're not even comparable to the force of a sneeze from me. A deep voice came from the shadow of the black water-robed man, and the disdain in his words was apparent. Jian Wushuang was stunned and immediately became indignant. It's not even as strong as a sneeze? Aren't you bragging too much? However, the shadow under the black water robe slowly raised his head. With just one look, Jian Wushuang shut his mouth obediently. That gaze contained everything: the destruction of the universe, the destruction of the primeval, and the one and only. With just one glance, Jian Wushuang was rendered speechless. The nothingness, which had not even appeared at the beginning of life, made him feel a sense of powerlessness. With just a glance, negative emotions began to grow wildly. Retracting his gaze, the black water-robed figure spoke again with a rare hint of interest in his tone. Next, tell me the most direct thought in your heart. If your universe is about to be completely destroyed, what would you do? Jian Wushuang's eyes turned cold immediately, even though the existence in front of him was beyond his knowledge. Trying hard to calm himself down, Jian Wushuang said, As long as I'm still alive, my universe will not be destroyed. Oh, what if you find that, in the end, you can't turn things around with your own strength? The black water-robed figure's tone carried a hint of mockery. Then I shall perish along with the entire universe, Jian Wushuang said indifferently. The black water-robed figure did not speak again. After what seemed like a long time, his slightly lazy voice sounded again. If you were given 3 choices, 1 is to die with the universe with your own strength, 2 is to surrender to the enemy universe to save your loved ones, and 3 is to get help from external forces and lead your own universe to counterattack until you kill all the enemy universes without leaving any living beings behind. Which one would you choose? The 3 options echoed in Jian Wushuang's mind. Without any hesitation, he slowly said, I choose the 3rd option. Interesting, interesting. Ripples appeared on his black water robe, and he seemed to be very excited. But do you know that once you choose this path, your loved ones and friends in the past, and even all the living beings in the universe, will not understand you and will cast you aside? Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang was extremely calm. Even if I'm beyond redemption and spurned by the loved ones and friends of the world, I'll die with no regrets. The black water robe surged and the endless water waves receded. Then, a large black robe appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. A scarred hand reached out from under the black robe and slowly pulled down the hood, revealing a face that looked both young and old at the same time. His eyeballs, which had no white, were like the purest and deepest black. He looked at Jian Wushuang and squeezed out a smile that looked like he was crying. I don't have a name, but in the past, they all called me the Old Master. Even the most difficult past had been destroyed in those ultimate years. His two pitch-black eyes reflected Jian Wushuang's past life. Don't look into my eyes. With your shallow experience, you'll easily get lost in an illusion. The black water-robed figure who called himself Old Master warned in a deep voice. Jian Wushuang suddenly woke up from the swamp-like memory, and his temples were covered in sweat. It was too strange and terrifying. What kind of existence was this old man? Kid, don't try to figure me out. I can easily see through your thoughts. A smile appeared on the old man's sickly and pale face. Jian Wushuang quickly abandoned all distracting thoughts and guarded his heart. You're the only person I like other than my friends. So, I'm going to help you once, Old Master said indifferently. Help me once? How can you help? Jian Wushuang was confused and did not know what to do. Old Master's body suddenly turned into a handful of black water and fell into the polar sea. Then, he quietly condensed behind him and looked into the distance with his black eyes. From your consciousness, I know that the universe you exist in seems to be suffering a catastrophe. It is beyond everyone's power, and it has completely fallen. It is only a matter of time before it is completely destroyed. Now, I've decided to help you. I'm going to turn this hopeless situation around. Everything you've seen before will never happen again. The sudden help did not make Jian Wushuang lose his rationality. He pondered for a moment, looked up at Old Master, and asked, "What are the conditions?" Old Master slightly raised the corner of his mouth. There are two conditions. The first condition is very simple. Completely destroy the enemy universe, leaving no living beings behind. Jian Wushuang's heart trembled. The first condition was obviously the third option that he had mentioned earlier. What, you're going back on your word now? Old Master sneered. Jian Wushuang did not say anything. He stared at him and made up his mind. I promised to do it. What's the second condition? Old Master smiled in satisfaction. Once you agree, it's a contract that can't be changed. As for the second condition, I'll only say it after you've completed the first condition. After saying that, he flicked his finger and a drop of black water fell into Jian Wushuang's right arm. Jian Wushuang pulled up his sleeve in a hurry and saw a tear-shaped divine pattern on his right wrist. As if sensing his worry, Old Master added, "This is a part of my consciousness, used for communication between you and me. It will do you no harm." Jian Wushuang heaved a sigh of relief, but he was still wary of this mysterious person. Ignoring Jian Wushuang, Old Master turned around slowly and stared at the flowing pitch-black polar sea. Old Palace Master, let's go. Amidst the boundless void energy, Ban Shan was bathed in blood. He sacrificed himself for the explosion and finally, he unleashed the most terrifying attack. The mountains and rivers were crushed into fine powder by this attack. However, this self-sacrificing attack was easily destroyed by Void Master Ba Huang. The huge palm strike crushed Ban Shan. Ba Huang, who was emitting a demonic bloodlight, had used some secret technique to take that step and reach the half-ancestor realm. Humph, I've long noticed that your motives are not pure. I originally planned to spare your life, but I didn't expect you to chase after your own death. As he casually dispelled the blood, Void Master Ba Huang curled his lips in disgust. Then he looked at Dao Yen, who was covered in blood and on the verge of death. His eyes flashed with desire. Ba Huang, this isn't something you can touch. Devour One's cold voice came from behind. Void Master Ba Huang hurriedly agreed and ran toward Snake God. The black mist dissipated, and Devour One came to Dao Yen. Give me your comprehension, and I'll spare your life for the time being. He coughed out a wisp of divine blood and looked at him calmly. Everything I have belongs to the divine power universe. Even if I die and my spirit is destroyed, you can forget about taking anything from me. Why do you have to do this? Hand it over to me now, and I can still let you die with dignity. Otherwise, I can only kill you first and then extract your comprehension inch by inch. Devour One clenched his fist in the air, and Dao Yan's body was immediately suspended in the air, while Chu Ji hiding behind him fell on the deck. Dao Yan was not afraid. He looked contemptuous. In that case, I'll just take it. Devour One did not speak anymore. He reached out to Dao Yan's chest, and a red light flashed. Eh? Where is your comprehension? Devour One was confused. Supreme Dao Yan laughed. How ridiculous! I said it before. The void universe can forget about touching any of my stuff. Devour One did not speak anymore. An infinite amount of red light rose and tore Supreme Dao Yan into pieces like a snake. At this point, Dao Yan had fallen in the void universe. Only a young man was left in the huge cosmic boat. I'm already like this, and you're still so persistent. Do you really think I don't have the power to retaliate? In the divine power cage, Snake God, who had recovered 70 to 80% of his power, looked coldly at the Void Master Ba Huang. With your current strength, you're no match for me even if you're at your peak. Give me your comprehension and I'll let you die in a better way. Ba Huang, who was at the peak of half-ancestor realm, sneered. Snake God fought like a trapped beast, and his void power rose up. Ba Huang's face turned cold and he raised his palm to slap Snake God. Whoosh! The polar sea trembled, and the water level suddenly rose thousands of feet. The waves surged, and two figures stepped on the tide. Zhejian Wushuang. Snake God's eyes widened and he felt as if he had just been reborn. Without thinking, he shouted, Jian Wushuang, Elder Dao Yan and Elder Ban Shan have already died in their hands. You're too noisy. A look of disgust flashed in Void Master Ba Huang's eyes as he swung his palm at Snake God. A bolt of divine power swept over and headed straight for Ba Huang. As Ba Huang was forced to retreat, Jian Wushuang rushed forward and slashed at his right arm with the Tarot Divine Sword. Swish! Ba Huang's entire right arm had been cut off. Before he could scream, he was kicked away by Jian Wushuang again. After putting away the Tarot Divine Sword, Jian Wushuang did not look at Snake God. He leaped onto the cosmic boat, having a strong premonition. Devour One, who was hidden in the black mist, looked at Jian Wushuang calmly. We meet again. Stop bullshitting. Where are Elder Dao Yan and Elder Ban Shan? Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold and his palm was already on the hilt of the sword at his waist. Those two guys. Devour One shrugged slightly. I just killed them. Jian Wushuang's pupils shrank and he roared. You deserve to die. Tens of thousands of sword intents shot up to the sky and pointed at Devour One. The majestic heavenly divine gate emerged, and a giant finger that reached the sky pressed down. The 10,000 Daos returned to one, turning into the most ordinary move and slashing toward Devour One. Impudent! Devour Two, who had been silent all this time, shouted and went past Devour One to meet the sword intent. The red and black rays of light collided with each other. He did not even have time to be proud as the plain sword intent instantly tore through Devour Two's light and slashed straight at him. Devour Two's pupils shrank, and the great horror of life and death stunned him. He had never expected that Jian Wushuang, who was only a half-step unparalleled supreme realm, would be able to break through his defense. From the broken sky, the giant fingers of the heavenly divine gate pressed down at the same time. The star field of the polar sea was completely shattered. The stars further away exploded, and the earth finally collapsed completely. Boom, boom, boom. The sword intent swept across and pressed down on Devour Two together with the heavenly divine gate's giant finger. An extreme brightness covered everything, and the hurricane swept through the remaining broken earth. After an unknown amount of time, the explosion dissipated, and Jian Wushuang could finally see everything in front of him clearly. In the broken void, Devour One was standing in place with Devour Two, who was almost torn in the middle, in his arms. Divine blood gushed out of the wound uncontrollably. It was obvious that he was exhaling more than he was inhaling. My lord! Void Master Ba Huang leaped over. Although his arm had regrown, he was in an extremely sorry state. After passing Devour Two, who was on the verge of death, to Ba Huang, Devour One walked slowly toward Jian Wushuang in the void. With every step he took, the void cracked. An unparalleled void power surged like a huge sea. It was the aura of a half-ancestor. Jian Wushuang also waited with rapt attention. Jian Wushuang, you shouldn't have existed. If you weren't his disciple, I would have reported to Devouring Emperor and asked him to recruit you. Unfortunately, you are his disciple, so I can't let you live. You're blessed by the heavenly Tao, and you're like a monster. You can kill a half-step ancestor when you're only in the half-step unparalleled supreme realm. But, we have plenty of geniuses around here. Those who are more talented than you have already stood at the top. Devour One's voice resounded throughout the 9 heavens and 10 lands. He had taken the last step and reached the ancestor realm. Advancing from half-ancestor to ancestor was a chasm that could never be filled with hard work. Those were the true shackles, and only by drawing from the luck of a universe could one break through those shackles. The fate energy of the void universe was almost dried up. How could another ancestor realm expert be born? The terrifying void power seemed to carry the entire void universe and press down on Jian Wushuang. As soon as the ancestor realm aura appeared, everything was set in stone. Jian Wushuang, dying in my hands is your final destination. Countless red lights turned into 6 big hands and gradually condensed behind Devour One. Every hand was filled with the laws of heaven and earth. Jian Wushuang remained standing at the spot. His eyes gradually turned from complicated to calm. The eyes of Snake God, who was curled up in the cage of divine power, were about to pop out. Let me out, let me out. If things were like before, Jian Wushuang could only close his eyes and wait for death. However, now everything had changed. A dark red giant arm, which held the power of rules of heaven and earth, smashed down on Jian Wushuang. After that, 2 arms, one bright and one dark, like the sun and moon, also suppressed one after another. The starry sky shattered, and even the void, which represented nothingness, began to collapse on a large scale under this ancestor realm aura. Looking at the 3 arms that covered the sky, Jian Wushuang just stepped back, not worried about the danger he was in. Snake God in the divine power cage seemed to have gone mad. He madly hit the cage, trying to escape. Feeling the warmth from his wrist, Jian Wushuang looked back. Old Master had his right hand behind his back, and his left hand held a water staff formed by the water of the polar sea. As the tip of the staff touched the void, countless tiny and dense dark lights suddenly surged out and spread in all directions. The polar sea, which spanned countless star fields, surged and rose. Huge waves rose to the sky, transforming into a black phantom that reached the sky. The 3 arms on Devour One's back suppressed the world with an ancestor realm aura. However, when the frost-like black light covered the void for hundreds of millions of miles, the laws of the 3 arms seemed to be cut off and they were dying rapidly. At the same time, the black phantom formed by the polar sea walked out of the polar sea and punched one of the 3 arms. Boom, boom, boom. The explosion reverberated throughout the universe. The red arm was smashed by the black phantom. With another 2 punches, the dark and light arms that were suspended in the void were also smashed. Ripples flowed all over the black phantom's body, and it crashed heavily into Devour One, who was standing in the void. Devour One snorted deeply. Instead of retreating, he attacked. The remaining 3 giant arms on its back condensed into a sharp giant spear at the same time and stabbed into the black phantom's chest. Time seemed to have stopped, and thousands of crimson cracks appeared from the heart of the black phantom. Then, it completely collapsed and returned to the water of the polar sea. Devour One reappeared. His ancestor realm aura was still vast and long. A single scarlet eye turned from Jian Wushuang to Old Master, revealing a rare look of fear. At the same time, a strange card with a metallic luster appeared in his hand. Jian Wushuang's heart trembled. The dimension reduction attack of the strange card had left a deep impression on him. If Supreme Master Gai Fu had not made his move at the end, he would not have been able to escape the strange energy in the card. Just as he was about to remind Old Master to be careful, he realized that Old Master had disappeared. This strange energy fluctuation, although extremely weak, should not be a product of this universe. A low voice quietly rang behind Devour One's ears. He threw the card behind him without thinking. Like the tide, Old Master's pale palm immediately reached out and grabbed the card. With a cracking sound, The card that even an invincible Supreme Realm warrior was helpless against was easily crushed by Old Master. Turned into powder. Devour One's pupils shrank, and the arm behind him pierced toward Old Master's heart. The water rippled, and his figure disappeared. When he reappeared, he was in front of Devour One. Tell me, who gave you this thing you're using, and who sealed the energy inside? Old Master's voice was filled with undeniable authority. At the same time, he stretched out his palm, and a beam of black light burst out, immediately tearing one of Devour One's arms. You're counting death. Devour One went crazy. He had never been humiliated like this since he started following Devouring Emperor. Now, this guy who had come out of nowhere had destroyed his arms of laws so easily. That was a law he had only grasped after reaching the peak of the Ancestor Realm. When Devour One reached the Ancestor Realm, he had absolute confidence that he could fight against a foe as strong as Void God with the trump card that Devouring Emperor had given him. However, now all of his confidence and trump cards had been ruthlessly stepped on by this sickly fellow. Are you going to tell me or not? Old Master's voice was cold. He reached out and flicked his hand, and another arm of laws behind Devour One was cut off like a fallen leaf in the autumn wind. Devour One went completely crazy. His last remaining arm of laws turned into a huge spear with an endless Ancestor Realm aura, and stabbed at the old man. Old Master's face was full of disdain, and he only stretched out his right index and middle fingers and gently pointed. In an instant, dense black cracks emerged from the forefront of the arm of laws and spread rapidly. In just a breath, the arm of laws was broken inch by inch. Devour One could not believe it. Even if he could fight Void God now, he would be on par. Plus, he had countless trump cards. He could probably even defeat Void God. However, this sickly man who had suddenly appeared before him had dispelled his Ancestor Realm power with a single finger. Who exactly was he? Coldness rose from the bottom of his heart. Devour One did not hesitate anymore and directly activated the aura in his life source. The void completely collapsed and cracked. With Devour One as the center, an indescribable and terrifying power suddenly surged. Like a terrifying dragon, it constructed an extremely special energy field in the void. Old Master dodged the fierce surge of the special energy and stood behind Jian Wushuang again. A special red and black light shuttled through it, quickly outlining a mysterious phantom. Runes that were emitting a dim fluorescent light were circling around the figure, and the black gold 10,000 leaves armor was moving rhythmically in the wind. However, the face of the apparition was completely hidden in the fog and could not be seen clearly. Only an imperial crown appeared through the fog. Seeing the phantom, the extremely weak Devour One immediately knelt down. Greetings, Lord Devouring Emperor. Jian Wushuang's body trembled as he looked at the blurry image of the crown. He suddenly realized something. Supreme Tarot, who had single-handedly suppressed the geniuses of 10,000 races and created the Tarot Sword Manual, had fallen at the hands of this Devouring Emperor. However, the apparition of the crown only existed for a moment. It reached out its hand and swept up Devour One, Void Master Ba Huang, and the others, then quickly dissipated. From its appearance to its disappearance, it only took a dozen breaths, and then everything returned to silence. A drop of cold sweat trickled down Jian Wushuang's temple. The aura of desolation that the phantom exuded was different from that of an Ancestor Realm expert, but it was also similar. Even old Ancestor Realm experts such as Cosmos God and Void God had never made Jian Wushuang tremble. Only two people made Jian Wushuang react this way. The other was the illusory shadow of Devouring Emperor, which Devour One had just summoned. The appearance of these two existences made Jian Wushuang begin to doubt whether the true peak of the universe was the Ancestor Realm. As Jian Wushuang was lost in his thoughts, Old Master beside him sighed slightly. It seems that the rules of the universe still have a great restriction on me. Jian Wushuang was speechless. It was already beyond his imagination that Old Master could suppress Devour One, who had reached the Ancestor Realm, with just one finger. Jian Wushuang swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Then he leaped toward the broken cosmic boat. Its tiny body was curled up in a corner, and her eyes were filled with fear. As soon as she saw Jian Wushuang, she immediately pounced on him and sobbed in a low voice. Terrible chess player. Elder Dao Yan and Elder Ban Shan are dead. Jian Wushuang's eyes dimmed. When he returned from the Polar Sea, he had already noticed that their auras had completely disappeared. Devour one? I'll kill you. Jian Wushuang's eyes sank. I want to go home. I don't want to stay here anymore. Large tears fell from her young eyes. Everything she had experienced in the past few days had almost made her mind collapse. If Jian Wushuang had not been there, she would have died. Jian Wushuang nodded. Okay, let's go home now. It's time to set off. Your mission should also begin. Old Master appeared on the deck and reminded Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang did not speak. Even without Old Master's reminder, it was time to start the revenge that had been accumulating in his heart for a long time. Since you all started this catastrophe, you must also be aware that you've reaped the consequences of your own actions. After leaving the already shattered polar sea star field, the dilapidated cosmic boat quickly shuttled through the major star fields. He had stayed in the void universe for 2 years, but it was as if he had suddenly realized something. The battles along the way had made Jian Wushuang grow a lot, and his half-invincible supreme realm had been completely stabilized. The strong wind made Jian Wushuang's robe flutter as he sat cross-legged on the bow of cosmic boat. He took out a thumb-sized seed from his bosom and carefully used divine power to nurture it. This was the final strand of life source essence that the Dao Yen had left behind. Perhaps after millions of chaos cycles, it would be able to regain consciousness. What Jian Wushuang could do now was to nourish it carefully. A jade-like tender shoot slowly emerged, and Jian Wushuang laughed. What humans feared the most was not the unknown darkness, but when hope was lost and there was no light. The divine power universe was like this jade-like bud. How could it fall forever if the heart fire was still there? Snake God, who had lost all his void power and turned back into a normal person, looked at Jian Wushuang in fear and horror. Jian Wushuang had planted a life restriction in his life source, buried in the deepest part of his body. From then on, his life was completely in Jian Wushuang's hands. Unless Jian Wushuang died, Snake God would be suppressed for hundreds of millions of chaos cycles. Old Master, who was sitting high above on the top of the void cosmic boat, had become interested the moment he saw Chuji. He would occasionally transform into various shapes to tease Chuji. However, Chuji was only close to Jian Wushuang and treated everyone else like a scourge. Old Master had no choice but to give up. After traveling for a month, Jian Wushuang finally arrived at the 23rd crack again. With a wave of his hand, he killed nearly 20 ordinary Void Masters guarding the barrier. The cosmic boat of the divine power universe finally left the Void universe. The barrier rippled, and cosmic boat stopped at the outermost layer of the divine power universe. The astral winds were raging, and even ordinary supreme realm martial artists would find it difficult to stay in such an environment for too long. Jian Wushuang looked back, then drove the cosmic boat in the direction of the Land of Sorrows. The cold, dead, and silent star field was still there. If there was no war between the two universes, no one would come to this border area even at the end of time. As the cosmic boat moved forward, the faint aura of void power flowing in the cold and withered star field made Jian Wushuang frown. Could it be that people from the void universe had already started to enter the vicinity of the Land of Sorrows? As Jian Wushuang thought about it, he started to feel uneasy. The disciples of the Divine Life Palace who were left in the Land of Sorrows were one of the heart fire of the divine power universe. If an existence like Devour One came here, the consequences would be unimaginable. At the thought of this, Jian Wushuang did not dare to stay any longer. He immediately steered the cosmic boat and rushed towards the Land of Sorrows at full speed. After sprinting for more than a month, Jian Wushuang ran into a group of people he did not want to meet the most. He was wearing a black shirt and a black mask, revealing only a red eye, which was the symbol of the Devourers. At this moment, 4 members of Devourers were hurrying over from the direction of the Land of Sorrows. The leader of the group froze on the spot when he saw the shabby cosmic boat. just as Jian Wushuang gathered all his divine power and was prepared to fight a fierce battle. The 4 members of Devourers turned into 4 bolts of lightning and avoided the cosmic boat. Then they headed toward the void universe without looking back. Old Master, who was lying on the top of the cosmic boat, only opened his eyes to look at the place where the Devourers had left. Then he closed his eyes and went back to sleep. That's it. Jian Wushuang was confused, but he did not stay for long. He continued to fly towards the land of sorrows. After another half a month, the cosmic boat finally arrived at the land of sorrows. Looking at the familiar passage, Jian Wushuang heaved a long sigh of relief. However, when he looked at the Imperial Ancestor ruins not far away, he began to think. Those members of Devourers didn't enter the land of sorrows. Did they enter the Imperial Ancestor ruins? Could Devour One, who had reached the Ancestor realm, be related to the Imperial Ancestor ruins? After thinking for a while, Jian Wushuang drove the cosmic boat into the land of sorrows. There were no longer any strange ghosts or weeping songs in the dark passage. It was just like an ordinary passage. After passing through the final barrier, the brilliant divine might was reflected in his eyes. The god burial ground ruins that were frozen in time contained a godly might. Even the old master, who was lying on the top of the cosmic boat, bounced up instantly. Such a well-hidden blessed land. I really did not expect it, Old Master murmured softly. Jian Wushuang did not hear what Old Master said. He had already plunged into the depths of the burial ground when he landed the comic boat. Over there, tens of thousands of training halls of various sizes were densely packed. It was a spectacular sight. There was a disciple of the Divine Life Palace meditating in each small training hall. At this moment, Supreme Junfu and Supreme Tianyi were teaching a group of disciples who had just advanced to the Supreme Realm how to skillfully regulate their meridians. Ninth Kulpa King, who was dressed in a white robe, was lying down in his own training hall. Together with Lon Lon, they were supervising whether there were any disciples slacking off. Supreme Shui Bo, who had been in seclusion until Jian Wushuang left, had woken up a long time ago and continued to cultivate in front of the myriad Taoist Right Temple. Ninth Kulpa King had been doing this kind of supervision task for several years. When he inadvertently yawned, a young ranger in black clothes and robes appeared in front of him. Jian Wushuang? Ninth Kulpa King jumped up. When he saw that the guy in front of him was really Jian Wushuang, he opened his arms and hugged him heavily. Hey, be gentle. It's not like we haven't seen each other for a few hundred years. Jian Wushuang laughed and hugged him back. No matter when or what realm he was in, Ninth Kulpa King and the Divine Life Palace had already been regarded as an indispensable part of Jian Wushuang's life. Letting go of Jian Wushuang, Ninth Kulpa King looked at him carefully and then smiled. Your realm has improved a lot. If I had known earlier, I would have gone with you. Jian Wushuang smiled and said, Did anything happen while I was gone? Ninth Kulpa King said, Nothing much. Everything is normal. In addition, I'll tell you some good news. In the past few years, more than 90 disciples have broken through the ruler realm and reached the supreme realm. Jian Wushuang laughed and said, It's indeed good news. There are nearly 400 supremes in total. It's enough to influence the entire battle. As the two of them conversed, Supreme Junfu, Supreme Tianyi, and the others had already found out about Jian Wushuang's return and ran over happily. Palace Master Wushuang, forgive us, we're late. The two of them cupped their hands, and there was a bit of excitement between their brows. Greetings, Palace Master Wushuang, Lon Lon said with a smile. Lung Wushuang also ran over. She could not hold back her desire to see the man she had been thinking about all day long. She opened her arms and hugged Jian Wushuang tightly. I've made you worry, madam. Jian Wushuang patted Lung Wushuang on her back. Holding back her tears, Lung Wushuang said, If you're going to such a dangerous place next time, I'll go with you. Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly and said, As you wish. Chu Ji knelt on the deck and looked at the warm scene through the gap of the railings. Her eyes were red. What's the matter, little girl? What's there to be sad about? Old Master appeared beside the Chu Ji at some point in time, and her figure was reflected in his dark pupils. Chu Ji hurriedly rubbed her eyes. "No, some sand just got into my eyes." The elderly man shook his head helplessly. He looked at Jian Wushuang, who was not far away, and then at Chu Ji. He said indifferently, "Let's go, little girl. We should go down. Has Shuebo already broken through to reach the invincible supreme realm?" Jian Wushuang nodded after hearing the confirmation from Jun Fu. It was even more difficult for an invincible supreme to reach the half-ancestor realm than for a half-ancestor to reach the ancestor realm. It was never difficult to create two from one, but it was rare to create one from the origin. To advance from the invincible supreme realm to the half-ancestor realm, one had to be born from the origin. It was a path that was completely unimaginable. From the confusion, he saw himself. One would gain enlightenment from the Tao, and gain Tao from enlightenment. Every step was a process of denial and reconstruction, like a phoenix rising from the ashes to finally prove its own Tao. As for Supreme Shuebo, he had successfully advanced to the half-ancestor realm. It seems that our divine life palace has two half-ancestor level existences. We'll be able to fight against the high-end combat forces of the void universe, Master Jun Fu analyzed. In his subconsciousness, he had already regarded Jian Wushuang as a half-ancestor realm expert. However, what if the void god breaks free from the seal? Supreme Tain Yi promptly reminded him. It seems that the time is almost up. Hearing Tian Yi's words, everyone fell silent. Void God was in the ancestor realm. Without the restraint of Cosmos God, who could contend against him? Ancestor realm beings stood at the peak, regardless of whether they were from the divine power universe or the void universe. That realm had long surpassed everyone's imagination. Void God could destroy the divine power universe with a wave of his hand. If it was the previous Jian Wushuang, he would probably still feel helpless about this problem. However, he was no longer the same as before. One move could suppress Devour II at half-ancestor realm and destroy a part of Void God's true shadow. As long as Jian Wushuang was not surrounded by many half-ancestors and it was the home field of the divine power universe, he was confident that he could stabilize the battlefield. The only variable was that Void God and the Devourers were now corresponding opponents. Jian Wushuang turned around. Old Master walked over slowly in his black water robe, had a childish look on his face. His special aura seemed to be carrying the entire polar sea behind him, full of endless power. The old man from the polar sea star field, who had signed a contract with Jian Wushuang and whose background was unknown, was already standing with Jian Wushuang. Although Supreme Jun Fu and the others did not show any hostility, they still became cautious when they sensed the special energy fluctuations that could not be ignored. Supreme Shuebo, who had been meditating, opened his eyes at the same time. The terrifying divine power of a half-ancestor soared into the sky. In the next moment, he appeared in front of Jian Wushuang and looked at Old Master with great caution. "He's on our side, Supreme Shuebo." Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly and said. Then, he briefly explained how he had met Old Master. However, Jian Wushuang did not mention that the old man had killed Devour I easily. After all, in such a situation, it would only confuse the disciples. After hearing Jian Wushuang's words, Junfu nodded and said, "In that case, he's not from the Void Universe. He must belong to our divine power universe." Old Master did not speak and stood behind Jian Wushuang with Chu Ji. "And this is?" Supreme Jun Fu looked at Chu Ji in confusion. Jian Wushuang's eyes dimmed. "It's a child under the sky-ceiling ancestor. Her name is Chu Ji." The atmosphere instantly turned heavy. For a moment, everyone loathed the various evil deeds of the Void Universe. Palace Master Wushuang. All disciples of the Divine Life Palace are at your disposal. Supreme Shuebo knelt down on one knee and cupped his hands. Tens of thousands of voices rang out at the same time, shaking the clouds. After making the plan, the disciples of the Divine Life Palace in the Land of Sorrows boarded the cosmic boat and prepared to leave. Standing at the bow of the first cosmic boat, Jian Wushuang looked at the god burial ground, which was still as majestic as ever. His eyes were filled with gratitude and he bowed 3 times. The familiar scene gradually faded away. The small dojo of 10,000 square meters was lifted up by an ownerless divine power and still maintained its original state. It was as if they had only left for a while and would soon return to their respective dojos. Every disciple of the Divine Life Palace knew that most of them would die on the battlefield. However, they still did not turn back, as if they were going to do something insignificant. This was their duty and their mission. After leaving the Land of Sorrows, Jian Wushuang looked at the Imperial Ancestor ruins. After hesitating for a moment, he gave up. The Divine Power universe had already fallen, and he could not waste any time. Void God had yet to return. Jian Wushuang decided to kill all the living forces in the Void universe during this period of time. Within 3 months, the 3 cosmic boats had started to approach the battlefield from the edge of the Divine Power universe. As they got closer and closer to the battlefield, some broken pieces of treasures and the remains of Supreme Realm cultivators started to appear. The divine blood formed a river and floated in the void. It would continue to flow for tens of thousands of chaos cycles until it was slowly turned into nutrients and absorbed by the universe. There was no longer any fighting in the shattered starry sky on the off-world battlefield. Only the wreckage of the Supremes floated miserably in the void. It was only when he arrived at the base camp that was originally guarded by Cosmos God that Jian Wushuang felt a surge of void power. From a distance, there were no less than 15 Void Masters patrolling the periphery, not to mention the other Void Masters who had already occupied the base camp. Suppressing his anger, Jian Wushuang signaled the cosmic boat to stop at a distance. He brought Old Mater and Shuebo to the base camp quietly. Old Master had never refuted or denied Jian Wushuang's plans. It was as if he would do whatever he wanted. Even Jian Wushuang, who had the lowest cultivation realm among the 3 of them, had the strength of a half-ancestor. It was easy to kill a group of Void Masters who had only reached the 3-scar level. However, it would be difficult to do it quietly. Just as Jian Wushuang was about to release the 4-season control of the Tarot Sword Manual, a familiar aura of desolation spread from Old Master's hand. A dark crystal light appeared in the void and covered the periphery of the main camp like frost. The patrol team of 14 Void Masters seemed to have fallen into a swamp and stopped moving. The aura was sealed in ice, and the surroundings were so quiet that even the astral winds could not be heard. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang shouted and rushed over. With a wave of his hand, his vast divine power crushed the 14 Void Masters into powder like thunder. Even Supreme Shuebo, who had already advanced to the half-ancestor realm, could not help but gasp when he saw that Jian Wushuang had killed more than a dozen Void Masters with such a casual palm strike. His heart immediately burned with excitement. In just 1 year, Jian Wushuang had been able to suppress so many Void Masters. What about 1,000,000 years later? Would he be able to become the next Cosmos God and lead the Divine Power universe out of its predicament? 1,000,000 years was just a period of time for them to enter closed-door cultivation, but it also contained endless possibilities. If Supreme Shuebo had known that Jian Wushuang had killed a half-ancestor by himself, his jaw would have been dislocated. After eliminating the patrol team, 3 figures quietly entered the base camp. In the magnificent and vast hall, nearly 100 powerful figures gathered and chatted happily. The giant man sitting at the head of the table had 6 shining scars on his shoulders. He held 2 trembling maids from the Divine Power universe in his arms and laughed. In this hall full of Void Masters, sitting at a square table below the giant man, Divine Power was surging. A handsome, middle-aged man was dressed in a Confucian robe. There were 2-inch-long dragon horns in his black hair, indicating his identity as someone from the Dragon Clan. Natural divine power surged around his body, and at this moment, he was drinking and chatting with the Void Masters in the hall. If Jian Wushuang had seen this, he would definitely have realized that this handsome and elegant middle-aged man was Long Bai, the 3rd heir of the Dragon Clan, the younger brother of the evil Dragon Clan leader, Long Chun, who had entered the invincible Supreme Realm. Smoke rose from the incense burner in the center of the hall. A drunk 6-scar Void Master kicked the table away and began to dance in the hall with his ugly and strange body. Long Bai sat in his original position, a trace of disgust flashing through his eyes, which was quickly concealed by a smile. He clapped from time to time, as if he was watching a beautiful dance. The giant man sitting at the head of the table laughed out loud again. He directly picked up the maidservant sitting on his left leg, stretched out his arms, and twisted her head off. Blood splattered as the huge man twisted off the head of another maidservant. The two heads fell into the huge man's hands like walnuts and were coiled up. "Long bye." A low and gloomy voice came from the huge man's mouth. "The 200 maidservants you sent are really good. I enjoyed most of them. Look." Upon hearing this, Longbai smiled and cupped his hands. "Lord High Void Emissary, as you said, I will offer you another 300 holy maidens for you to enjoy." The giant man called High Void Emissary nodded in satisfaction. "That's good. When Void God returns, I'll speak to him and ask him to leave the Dragon Clan behind while we continue to control the area." Long Bai's eyes flashed with joy, and he quickly cupped his hands. "Thank you, Lord High Void Emissary. The Dragon Clan is willing to do our best to help Void God expand his territory." High Void Emissary smiled sinisterly and said with a strange voice, "I heard that your Dragon Clan is prosperous. The women in your clan are all exceptionally beautiful and have strong bodies. How about you bring 10 women from your clan next time?" A trace of fury burst out in Long Bai's eyes. He almost wanted to kill the High Void Emissary in an instant, but he forcibly suppressed it. "I don't understand what High Void Emissary means," Long Bai said through gritted teeth. The High Void Emissary smiled sinisterly. "As long as you bring the 10 Dragon Clan women to me, the Dragon Clan's original territory will remain unchanged, and you can choose any 7 territories for your own use. How about it?" The Dragon Clan's innate pride and dignity were completely humiliated. Long Bai's palm, hidden under the sleeves of his robe, slowly loosened. After that, he cupped his hands and said without changing his expression, "This is a serious matter. Please allow me to go back and ask for the opinions of the patriarchs." After saying this, Long Bai sat back down in a daze. The overbearing leader of the Dragon Clan, who had led all the major forces to besiege the Divine Life Palace of Life, was now begging for peace like a dog. He could vaguely sense that the opinions of the patriarchs were completely wrong. However, could everything still be salvaged? The High Void Emissary, who was sitting at the head, was extremely happy. This race that was known for their arrogance was being humiliated by him at this moment. That feeling of conquest was far more satisfying than slaughtering the entire star field. The High Void Emissary leaned back in his chair in satisfaction. Perhaps it was because he had drunk too much wine or because he had gathered too much yin, but his head began to feel a little dizzy. Everything began to spin, and overlapping shadows appeared. The High Void Emissary tried to shake his head and glanced at the center of the giant hall. He did not know when, but 3 figures were standing there. "Who are you? Quickly report what happened," the High Void Emissary shouted. However, he did not get an answer. The group of Void Masters who were still toasting each other seemed to have been frozen, and they did not move. The High Void Emissary finally regained some of his senses. To his horror, he realized that he could no longer move his body. A blood phantom suddenly appeared in front of him. A domineering, furious roar was the last sound the High Void Emissary heard. "Bastard!" Supreme Shuebo extended his palm, and the divine power of a half-ancestor easily shattered his head. A mist of blood spurted out, and the mountain-like figure collapsed. Everything seemed to be playing in slow motion. Long Bai watched the entire scene, and his heart turned cold. "You have disappointed me. Your Dragon Clan has disappointed me too much." A pained voice rang out, and a figure appeared in front of Long Bai. Long Bai slowly raised his head, and that face that he couldn't be more familiar with was now imprinted in his eyes. Jen Wushuang. His eyes were filled with pain as he looked at that face. For some reason, the resentment in his heart had disappeared without a trace, replaced by shame and guilt. "An ancient race that has existed since the chaos of the world. Have all your pride been eaten by dogs?" Jen Wushuang glared at Long Bai and directly pulled him up by the collar. Long Bai came back to his senses and felt humiliated. The divine power that belonged to an invincible supreme forced Jian Wushuang to take a few steps back. How dare you, Jian Wushuang? Do you think you can humiliate the Dragon Clan? Long Bai said angrily. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang sneered. It's not an outsider who's causing the humiliation, but you. The shame of being looked down upon made Long Bai lose his mind instantly. He immediately summoned his life origin phantom, a golden dragon with divine power, and collided with Jian Wushuang with extreme terror. As long as he killed Jian Wushuang, no one would ever know about the most humiliating side of the Dragon Clan. Boom! After the golden dragon phantom hit Jian Wushuang, it could not move an inch further. Jian Wushuang responded with his palm and then twisted it suddenly. The phantom golden dragon was crushed into powder. Long Bai himself, on the other hand, seemed to have been hit by a giant hammer. His figure retreated and was embedded into the wall with a loud bang. Retracting his palm, Jian Wushuang walked to Long Bai step by step, his eyes as calm as still water. After that, he slowly stretched out his palm and faced Long Bai, slapping his mouth with both hands. Each sound was louder than the last, as if they could crack the sky, and they echoed in the giant hall. After taking care of all the Void Masters in the hall, Supreme Shui Bo stood side by side with Old Master and watched Jian Wushuang whip and swing at Long Bai without blinking. His blood! Supreme Shui Bo smacked his lips. Old Master nodded in agreement. After a long time, Jian Wushuang finally stopped. He swung his palm and shook off the dragon blood. Long Bai, whose head was as swollen as a basket and whose face looked like he had opened a dye shop, finally knelt on the ground. Long Bai, who had almost been pulled out of his original form, had a dazed look in his eyes. He muttered, "I was wrong. I was wrong." Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang said, "This is not your fault alone. It's the fault of your entire Dragon Clan. I'm going to demand an explanation." Long Bai suddenly raised his head. "Let me go. I'll definitely persuade the patriarchs when I get back. I can't let you live. I can't let you live just because you've gathered the holy lands and holy maidens of the divine power universe and offered them to the void universe to torture and kill," Jian Wushuang said indifferently, as if he had set the final judgment. When Long Bai heard this, it was as if all his strength had been sucked out of him, and he slumped to the ground. "If that's the case, then help me pass a message to the Dragon Clan's patriarchs and tell them not to continue making mistakes." When a person was about to die, his words were also kind. When a bird is about to die, its cry is also sorrowful. Jian Wushuang nodded. Then he used his palm as a knife and cut off Long Bai's head. An invincible supreme being of the Dragon Clan had fallen just like that. The aura of the Dragon Clan's law enforcement officers, who would kill no matter how far away they were, did not appear again. "Palace Master Wushuang, shall we continue to move forward or?" Supreme Blood stepped forward and asked. Jian Wushuang waved his hand and put Long Bai's head into his interspatial ring. He muttered, "Now that the divine power universe has fallen, if we continue to advance rashly, I'm afraid we will run into the army of the void universe. We will station here and wait for reinforcements." "Reinforcements? We still have more," Supreme Blood said uncertainly. Jian Wushuang nodded. "If the reinforcements don't come, we'll go and invite them. For example, we'll go and invite the Dragon Clan, which has already returned to the Void Universe." "Well, what if they ignore us?" Supreme Shui Bo asked. Jian Wushuang said calmly, "If they stop at the edge of the cliff, or if they are reasonable, I will not pursue their surrender. But if they openly express that they have surrendered, then I will kill them all." Supreme Shui Bo felt a chill run down his neck. He felt that Jian Wushuang's words were law. If he said that he would kill the entire clan, he would definitely fulfill his promise. Supreme Shui Bo walked out of the giant hall in the main camp and led more than 10,000 disciples of the Divine Life Palace to the main camp. Jian Wushuang injected 2 of his ancestral skills, the Transcendence Heavenly Gate and Extreme Darkness Heavenly Gate, into the nailstone that could contain everything and handed it over to the Supreme Shui Bo for safekeeping. At the same time, he also injected the first move of the Star River Lake Seasword intent into the nailstone and handed it over to Supreme Jun Fu for safekeeping. With these 3 moves, Jian Wushuang was confident that even a half-ancestor would be killed. With Supreme Shuebo, Junfu and Tian Yi guarding the base camp, they would definitely be able to hold on until Jian Wushuang returned even if they were in danger. After giving some instructions to the crowd, Jian Wushuang brought Old Master along and set off for the Dragon Clan. The Dragon Clan's fief was vast and almost occupied the most ancient star field in the entire Divine Power universe. They enjoyed the most perfect resources, but in the Great Catastrophe War, they were the first to surrender. Jian Wushuang did not know how many forces in the star field had surrendered, but it was time to settle the score. Wanyi Star Field. The most ancient star field was the core star field of the Dragon Clan. Only the Dragon Clan's clansmen who had reached the Supreme Realm could enter and continue cultivating. It was said that the Wanyi Star Field contained the purest divine power core in the entire divine power universe. One day of cultivation there was equivalent to 100 years in the human world. As for Jian Wushuang, he was heading straight for Wanyi Star Field. Along the way, Jian Wushuang saw that half of the star fields and divine kingdoms had either been destroyed or were still resisting. The ordinary cultivators without any strength could only wait in despair for the monster that suddenly broke into their respective star fields. Looking at the evil deeds they had done, Jian Wushuang had no pity for them. With a wave of his hand, he killed them with all. Jian Wushuang had killed countless cultivators in the Void Universe and saved countless star fields by the time he arrived in the Wanyi Star Field. At this moment he was filled with anger. This was the most ancient and vast star area, and there was no sign of an invasion by the Void Warriors. It was peaceful and happy. Who dares to trespass the Dragon Clan's forbidden area? Leave quickly to avoid death. Waves of dragon power emerged from the towering gate and hit Jian Wushuang's body as if they were chasing away flies. Good, what a great prestige. Jian Wushuang was so angry that he laughed. He held the Tarot Divine Sword in his hand and said, "I'll see how long the Dragon Clan can hide today." The vast divine power was completely concentrated on the Tarot Divine Sword, and the divine power floating in the universe was all condensed under this sword. Break! The roar was like a divine punishment. The sword that had long exceeded the limits of the rules directly cracked the sky and collapsed the starry sky. Just one sword strike, vigorous and vast. A sword that could support the heavens and earth slashed towards the towering main gate of the Wanyi Star Field. As if doomsday had arrived, the main gate collapsed instantly. Sword intent swept across the earth, directly overturning mountains and rivers, reversing the flow of the sea, and changing the color of the sky. A sword that stretched for 1,000,000 miles turned everything into nothingness. Who did this? A loud roar that carried boundless dragon power resounded. A dark golden dragon rose up and looked at Jian Wushuang with his star-sized dragon eyes. The dark golden dragon's left arm had been cut off from the root, and dragon blood with a 7-colored divine rhythm flowed out. He was originally stationed at the main gate of the Wanyi Star Field and spent every day sleeping. Who would have thought that someone would call his door like this? If he had not been alert, his head would have been cut off. However, he tried his best to restrain himself and did not release his overbearing dragon's might. He was not a fool. The guy who could destroy thousands of miles of the Wanyi Star Field and cut off one of his arms with one sword strike was definitely not someone he could fight against. Jian Wushuang put away the Tarot Divine Sword and said, "Palace Master of the Divine Life Palace, I'm here to ask your patriarchs to come out." "You're impudent." The dark golden dragon could not take it anymore. He charged at Jian Wushuang with the pride of a dragon. With a cold snort, an invisible sword essence appeared and slashed down at the dark golden dragon. Without any sound, a huge dragon head with angry eyes was in Jian Wushuang's hands. The headless dragon corpse fell into the void with its last bit of inertia. Carrying the dragon head, Jian Wushuang brought the old man and entered the Wanyi Star Field. Dragon blood splattered on the ground, and dragon corpses fell into the mountain streams one by one. Jian Wushuang had killed countless descendants of the Dragon Clan, and there was already a pile of dragon heads in his interspatial ring. Jian Wushuang only put away the Tarot Divine Sword when the Dragon Clan's descendants stopped their pursuit. "Bring me to your patriarchs. If you don't, I'll visit them one by one." Jian Wushuang said coldly. He shook his body and dragon blood fell from his body. All of the dragon clan's descendants were terrified. No one dared to step forward to intercept him. Instead, they voluntarily opened up a path. Jian Wushuang did not say anything and just sped away. The mountains and rivers gradually disappeared, and in their place were giant dragon statues that stood tall. This was the forbidden land of the dragon clan. Since the beginning of chaos, only Jian Wushuang had set foot here. Each of the dragon statues had the aura of a half-ancestor. Among the dragon statues, there was a stone path paved with green stones that led to the huge hall that covered the sky. After dispersing his divine power, Jian Wushuang walked on the main road and approached the giant hall. The dragon statues on both sides seemed to come alive. All kinds of dragon breath formed a black and yellow qi that swept toward the giant hall. Jian Wushuang grinned. The Divine Life Palace has come to visit. I hope that all of you, who are hiding in the shadows, will come and meet me. A voice laced with divine power was like a bell that resounded through the 9 heavens and 10 lands. Jian Wushuang was not afraid at all. His voice grew louder and louder. The Divine Life Palace has come to visit. I hope that all of you, who are hiding in the shadows, will come and meet me. Nearly 100 golden dragons tore the sky apart and surrounded Jian Wushuang. Their dragon breaths filled the sky. With just a rough glance, he discovered that all the golden dragons were at the supreme realm, and he immediately sneered. Among the 100 golden dragons, a giant dragon with scales that shone with 7-colored light bowed its head from the sky. Do you know that this is the forbidden land of the dragon clan? If you die within 3 breaths, I will not pursue this matter. Jian Wushuang glanced at it from the corner of his eyes and clenched his fist. The 7-colored giant dragon in the air fell to the ground miserably, as if it had been grabbed by the neck. With the Tarot Divine sword in hand, Jian Wushuang was about to behead him when the clouds suddenly collapsed and a huge amount of dragon breath fell. Even Jian Wushuang had no choice but to avoid the dragon breath that was flowing down like a waterfall. The dragon's breath, which contained a holy aura, opened up the sky and protected all the descendants of the dragon race. At the same time, a huge red golden eye looked at Jian Wushuang through the clouds. You have 10 breaths of time. Leave this place quickly. You shouldn't be here. An extremely ancient voice seemed to have just woken up from a deep sleep, warning him. Jian Wushuang laughed disdainfully. Any land that belongs to the Divine Power Universe can be accessed by the people of the Divine Power Universe. Why can't we access this area? And who made the rule that outsiders were not allowed to enter? So what if I don't leave? Ignorant brat, since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. The scarlet golden eyes in the clouds suddenly focused, and the dragon's might was vast. A dark golden dragon head that seemed to carry the power of the entire star field appeared in the sky. Jian Wushuang raised his head and looked at the mighty golden dragon indifferently. He knew that he was the elder brother of Long Bai from the evil dragon clan, Long Chun, who had experienced the first great catastrophe war. At the same time, the giant claw that was covered with ancient scars was like a giant pillar that held up the sky and crushed down on Jian Wushuang. Old Master took a step forward and was about to hit the ground with the scepter condensed from black water, but he was stopped by Jian Wushuang. I'll do it, I can handle it. After Jian Wushuang finished speaking, a vast amount of divine power rose from his body and hit Long Chen's giant claw. Swish! The two energies that were enough to destroy the world collided, and the resulting explosion swept away the clouds. The gathered dragon clan descendants were also blasted far away by the explosion. The two stopped at the same time. The stone road under Jian Wushuang's feet had cracked into a big pit. As for Long Chen's giant claw, half of the scales on it had been shattered. The silence lasted for a few seconds before the giant dragon in the sky slowly dissipated. In its place was an old man with white hair and a white beard in a black and gold robe. Long Chun, who had been in a deep slumber for countless chaos cycles, had now awoken. The might of his third-generation bloodline caused all of the dragon clan descendants to prostrate themselves before him. Long Chun stood in front of the main gate of the giant hall, staring at Jian Wushuang with his golden eyes. Have seen you before. Long Chen's old but dignified voice rang out. Jian Wushuang said indifferently, yes, of course we've met. However, the few times we met were in such unpleasant situations. Long Chen snorted coldly and stepped forward. A towering dragon's might pressed down on him. You killed my people and destroyed millions of miles of my Wanyi star field. What do you think the dignity of the dragon race is? Hearing this, Jian Wushuang laughed. Since when did the dragon clan have dignity? Don't you all only know how to favor your own kind and suppress your fellow people in the same universe? Boy, you're looking for death. Long Chen's anger was like a punishment from the heavens. He struck Jian Wushuang with his palm. The giant claw tore the space apart, and the powerful divine power instantly blocked all his escape routes. Jian Wushuang remained standing in the same place. Facing the suppressing palm, he only drew out the tarot divine sword and slashed gently. Just like the melting of ice and snow, the most domineering dragon's breath seemed to drown in the ocean and dissipated. Jian Wushuang broke the dragon power easily and walked toward Long Chen. Long Chen, who had become an invincible supreme during the first great catastrophe, was now in the ancestral dragon forbidden land, and his strength was comparable to that of a half-ancestor. However, for some reason, when he saw this ant-like figure walking over, he suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of danger. However, this absurd thought was quickly thrown to the back of his mind. An ant was an ant. How could it shake a dragon? With this in mind, Long Chen took another step forward. His vast dragon breath surged and transformed into his natal golden dragon, which crashed into Jian Wushuang. He was sure that Jian Wushuang would not be able to block this attack no matter what. The frost that came from nowhere was like vines, growing and forming a magnificent cage. Supreme Tarot's phantom form appeared behind Jian Wushuang. It transformed into the purest tarot sword intent and slashed forward. The road paved with bluestone shattered from the middle, and the earth caved in. The golden dragon that was charging over was instantly cut in half from the center of its eyes when it came into contact with the tarot sword intent. The dragon breath was shattered, and the golden dragon phantom dissipated. Long Chen took a heavy step back, the qi and blood in his body in turmoil. With his natal dragon soul shattered, he also suffered a serious injury. Jian Wushuang glanced at the destroyed path under him and jumped up, heading straight for Long Chen. Ignoring his qi and blood, Long Chen also responded with a move. The majestic heavenly gate appeared out of nowhere, and a giant finger came from behind the gate, crushing down heavily. Long Chen, who had already raised his dragon breath to the level of a half-ancestor, felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave when he saw the giant finger above his head. That ancestral skill that could only be mastered by Cosmos God had smashed right into his head. The defense that had just been raised was crushed immediately. Long Chen did not even have time to make a sound before he disappeared completely in the brilliant divine might. The ground was completely shattered, and after the divine might dissipated, a huge pit was left behind. The 100 or so Dragon Clan descendants who were watching from afar immediately rushed over upon seeing this. Old Master stood in place and silently cast the black scepter. Invisible ripples formed a barrier that blocked all the Dragon Clan's descendants. In front of the giant pit, Jian Wushuang watched in slight amusement as he watched a figure slowly rising from the depths of the giant pit. Crystal-clear dragon blood flowed out from the bone-deep wound. Long Chen's body was already in pieces, and most of the dragon scales covering his body had also been shattered. Looking at the dying figure, Jian Wushuang was not in a hurry to attack. Instead, he said indifferently, "Do you want to ask why?" Long Chen did not speak, but stared at him with his dragon eyes. However, Jian Wushuang's next words made him tremble as if the most secretive thing had been made public. Why did the Dragon Clan surrender to the Void Universe? This short sentence was like a thunderclap. Long Chen's lips moved. How did you know?" Jian Wushuang said coldly. "Because I met someone I shouldn't have met in the base camp of the off-world battlefield and learned about these things." Long Chen seemed to have lost all his strength and asked in a daze, "Where is Long Bai now?" "Because of your wrong decision, Long Bai paid the price he should have paid. Jian Wushuang said as he touched his interspatial ring. Long Bai's lifeless head appeared in Long Chen's eyes. My brother! Long Chen pounced forward, but was stopped by Jian Wushuang. Kid, you're going to make the entire dragon clan your enemy. Long Chen stomped his feet and cried. Jian Wushuang was silent. After a long while, he said, I have never thought of being enemies with the dragon clan. Whether it was in the past or now, I have never thought of it. It's you who pushed the entire dragon clan to the brink of despair. You thought that by surrendering to the void universe, you would be able to preserve the true strength of the dragon clan. Little did you know that if the lips die, the teeth will grow cold. That will be the true disaster for the dragon clan. Jian Wushuang said coldly, Everything I've done today is to wake you up. Tell me, why did you surrender? Long Chen kept retreating, tears falling from his eyes. Now that the divine power universe has fallen and Cosmos God has died. Tell me, if we don't surrender, who can resist Void God and the Void universe? Foolish, Jian Wushuang said with hatred. Don't you know the principle of mutual dependence? You're willing to endure such humiliation for the sake of living space. Do you think that others will want you even if you claim your land and act like dogs when the divine power universe has fallen? Do you think they won't bite you just because you cut off your own teeth? After saying that, Jian Wushuang waved his hand and conjured an image. It was the scene in the base camp of the off-world battlefield. Long Bai, dressed in a long robe, sat below with an ashen face. The high void emissary's strange voice rang out. As long as you bring the 10 Dragon Clan women to me, the Dragon Clan's original jurisdiction will remain unchanged, and you can choose any 7 regions for your own use. How about it? Long Bai's eyes flashed with humiliation and rage, but he held it in. He cupped his hands and said, This is a serious matter. Please allow me to go back and ask the patriarchs for their opinions. The pride and dignity of the dragon race that came from the ancient times were completely destroyed and stepped on in such a short conversation. At the end of the scene, Long Bai said his last word of advice before he died. Tell my big brother and the others to stop making mistakes. My little brother, Long Chen cried out, and the world changed. Holding Long Bai's head with his divine power, Jian Wushuang gently pushed it to Long Chen. Even if you surrender to the void universe, they won't let you off so easily. They'll only slowly devour the entire dragon clan. Although the divine power universe has fallen, there is still a chance for it to rise again. I don't want the dragon clan to go astray on this path. So what if it lives and dies with the divine power universe? This is our honor and our mission. Jian Wushuang said calmly, If it's the opposite, the best situation for you is to be enslaved. Wouldn't your enslaved descendants curse you? The patriarchs who made the decision. Long Chen's body trembled, and as if he could no longer take it, he spat out a mouthful of blood. There was no longer any pride in his eyes, and it was replaced by old age and loneliness. You're Jian Wushuang, right? You're the little guy from the Divine Life Palace, right? Long Chen said slowly. Jian Wushuang replied, Yes. Long Chen nodded, his cloudy eyes full of relief. I have learned today. In the next moment, Long Chen suddenly struck out with his palm like a knife, aiming for his own neck. Then a head fell into the huge pit. Long Chen, who had voluntarily dispersed his cultivation, transformed into his natal golden dragon and slowly descended. Everything happened so quickly that Long Chen was already dead by the time Jian Wushuang could react. Jian Wushuang fell silent, looking at the golden dragon's corpse in the huge pit, which had dispersed its dragon breath. He murmured, What a strong-willed man. Patriarch. When the hundreds of descendants of the dragon race saw this, they all shed tears. Jian Wushuang gestured for Old Master to remove the barrier. The dragon clan members on the outside rushed to the huge pit like crazy and knelt down heavily on the ground. Could it be that this trip to the dragon clan is over just like this? Jian Wushuang looked at the dragon clan descendants who were kneeling on the ground and could not bear to punish them. At this moment, there seemed to be a long bell ringing, and countless black and yellow energies surged in the hall. The two gates opened slowly and a blurry figure waved his hand from afar, signaling Jian Wushuang to come forward. Without any hesitation, Jian Wushuang and Old Master looked at each other and immediately jumped into the sky-shrouding hall. When he stopped outside the hall, Jian Wushuang could vaguely see that the blurry figure was a middle-aged woman. The woman was dressed in plain clothes, with 2 wisps of Shenhuang qi wrapped around her left and right arms. When she saw Jian Wushuang, she lowered her head and said, "Follow me." With that, the woman took the lead and walked into the hall. Jian Wushuang did not doubt her and also stepped into the hall. As soon as he stepped in, the ripples that symbolized the enchantment spread slightly, and then returned to calmness. The extremely dense dragon breath filled every inch of the space. Even Jian Wushuang felt the pressure. The layout of this hall was very strange. At the center of the hall, there was a huge pillar that seemed to connect with the sky. On top of this giant pillar, there was a red-gold divine dragon that was almost as tall as the giant pillar. Each scale was twice the size of Jian Wushuang and was filled with pure golden essence. Holy and majestic, the middle-aged woman with the chi of heaven and earth wrapped around her hand said respectfully, "Patriarch, the guest is here." The huge scarlet golden scales began to move rhythmically. The golden dragon that was coiled on the giant pillar also began to move. The Shenhuang qi became thicker and an unimaginably huge dragon head seemed to hang down from the 9 heavens. Its eyes were like 2 star fields, reflecting Jian Wushuang's figure, and that Shenhuang qi spurted out from the nostrils of this unimaginably huge dragon. "Welcome. I'm the Dragon Emperor of the ancestral bloodline of the Dragon Clan. You can also call me Linha." Jian Wushuang was slightly shocked. He realized that the power of the Dragon King had already exceeded the half-ancestor level. Recovering from his shock, Jian Wushuang cupped his hands and said, "I'm Jian Wushuang. Greetings to Dragon Emperor Linha." The huge dragon's head slowly nodded, and speckles of golden light began to spread from its body. When the middle-aged woman saw this, she hurriedly said, "Patriarch, you can't." The dragon's body that was coiled on the giant pillar began to transform, and in a moment, it condensed into an old man in plain clothes. The 2 huge dragon horns seemed to prove that he had an almost endless lifespan. "Patriarch, you should continue to recuperate. How can you move again?" the middle-aged woman said worriedly. The old man named the Dragon Emperor Linha chuckled. "It's fine. I've been sick for a long time. It's fine to worsen it slightly." The middle-aged woman shook her head helplessly and did not say anything else. She followed behind the old man. "My young friend, this is the first time I've seen an outsider who isn't from the Dragon Clan since that war," Dragon Emperor Linha said amiably. The pride that belonged to the dragon race was nowhere to be seen on him, and he looked just like an ordinary old man. This caused the distance between the 2 of them to be shortened. Jian Wushuang thought for a while and then said, "Are you talking about the Great Catastrophe War? It's much longer than that." As if reminiscing, the Dragon Emperor Linha shook his head and laughed. "That war was a war between the Dragon, Phoenix, and Qilin clans. I got my old illness from that war. Little friend, do you know that before me, the universe's fate energy could give birth to more than one ancestor-level being?" Hearing this, Jian Wushuang was a little confused. "Isn't it only possible to produce one?" Linha laughed and shook his head. "Back then, I was still young and my father was already at the ancestor level. However, before the war between the 3 races, he suddenly fell and left me with an ancestor-level aura." With that, Dragon Emperor Linha opened his palm, and a wisp of mystical aura unique to the Dragon Clan appeared. With the appearance of the mysterious aura, the divine power in their bodies, including Jian Wushuang's, trembled and felt suppressed. It was the fate energy of an ancestor. Linha looked at the strand of ancestor-level fate energy in his hand and said softly, "I originally wanted to comprehend the fate left behind by my father. However, the war between the 3 races came soon after. There were also hidden injuries in my body during that war, and I was unable to break through to the ancestor level. Now," Dragon Emperor Linha looked at Jian Wushuang and waved his hand to transfer the ancestor fate energy to him. "It should have a master." Jian Wushuang trembled and said almost at the same time as the middle-aged woman, "No, this can't be. Patriarch, that is the foundation of our dragon clan." The middle-aged woman said anxiously, "You gave it to an outsider. What should we do?" Silence. Dragon Emperor Linhe was displeased. "Don't say anything more." Jian Wushuang forced a smile and said firmly, "Senior, this is too valuable. I will not accept it no matter what. If you insist on giving it to me, I will have to make you lose face." Dragon Emperor Linhe did not express his opinion. Instead, he said, "Little friend, can I have a word with you in private?" Jian Wushuang nodded in agreement and then asked Old Master to wait there. The middle-aged woman glared at Jian Wushuang and then flew out of the hall. After that, Dragon Emperor Linhe carried Jian Wushuang forward slowly. "I don't understand." After a while, Jian Wushuang said. Dragon Emperor Linhe changed his answer. "My young friend, do you know why we fought the war between the three races? Do you know why the foundation of the Dragon Clan was destroyed and we have not been able to recover?" Jian Wushuang shook his head. Linhe explained, "That's because our three clans found an ancestor-level fate energy together. In order to fight for that sliver of fate energy, a war broke out. As the most powerful of the three clans, the Dragon Clan should have easily obtained that fate energy. However, my father suddenly disappeared, causing the Dragon Clan to fall into a passive situation. Even so, I, who became the temporary clan leader, commanded the entire Dragon Clan and pushed the war to its climax. At that time, I was already half a step into that realm. I single-handedly injured the Phoenix Patriarch of the Phoenix Clan and the Qilin King of the Qilin Clan. Not long after, my body started to deteriorate. It was also at that time that my serious illness took place, and the war ended in a hurry. I'm still alive. It's just that the serious illness at that time still affects me even now, and I know that I don't have much time left." Linhe paused for a moment before he continued. "However, the Dragon Clan has suffered severe injuries. Even to this day, we have yet to recover fully. The descendants of the clan are mediocre and none of us have managed to achieve that enlightenment. The Phoenix Clan and the Qilin Clan have already recovered. I can almost be sure that the Qilin Clan has that small fate energy. If I'm alive, they'll still be afraid. If I die, I'm afraid the Dragon Clan will be annihilated in an instant." Dragon Emperor Linhe revealed a bitter expression. "That's why surrendering to the Void Universe was my order. I only wanted to give the Dragon Clan a chance to survive. However, it seems like I was wrong. I was gravely wrong." Hearing this, Jian Wushuang completely understood what he meant. After pondering for a while, he firmly pushed the Tao Ancestor Fate energy in his hands to Dragon Emperor Linhe. "I can't guarantee anything, but there's one thing I can promise you. As long as I'm alive, the only way the Dragon Clan dies is on the battlefield against the Void Universe." Jian Wushuang's calm words were like an oath. Hearing this, Dragon Emperor Linhe's eyes turned red. He bent his knees to bow, but Jian Wushuang quickly stopped him. "This old man is indebted to you, little friend. If you still decline the fate energy, I will no longer have any face left." Dragon Emperor Linhe cupped his hands and gave up his ancestor fate energy with a firm attitude. Jian Wushuang was speechless. He really did not want to accept it. After all, he was still far from the half-ancestor realm. If he accepted it so resolutely, not only would it be of great use to him, but he would also be owing the Dragon Clan a favor. In this way, he would have to take over the affairs of the Dragon Clan and the other two clans. It was really troublesome. However, looking at the determined look on Dragon Emperor Linhe's face, Jian Wushuang could only accept it for the time being. He added, "This is only temporary. If the Dragon Clan has an unparalleled prodigy in the future, I will definitely return it." Dragon Emperor Linhe understood what Jian Wushuang meant and a flash of sadness appeared in his eyes. "I've said before that, as long as I'm alive, the dragon race can only die on the battlefield. Now that the two universes are completely at war, the most important thing is to resist together." Jian Wushuang said, "This is the purpose of my visit." The Linhe Dragon Monarch said solemnly, "From now on, All the descendants of the Dragon Clan will be at your command. We'll fight the Void Universe to the last moment. Jian Wushuang replied, You don't have to listen to my orders. We have the same enemy. The Dragon Clan and the Divine Life Palace can be allies, and we will resist the Void Universe together. An army without a general is like a dragon without a head. Dragon Emperor Linhe shook his head and handed him a crystal-clear heart-protecting scale. This is my token. Keep it well. With this token, you can command the entire Dragon Clan. Jian Wushuang no longer declined. After putting the token into his interspatial ring, he said, Now that the Dragon Clan has returned, it's time for me to go back to the off-world battlefield and deploy my forces. Dragon Emperor Linhe nodded and said, My young friend, as far as I know, the Phoenix Clan has completely surrendered to the Void Universe. You must be on your guard. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang frowned and said, The Phoenix Clan surrendered. What about the Qilin Clan? The Qilin Clan has been struggling ever since the Great Catastrophe War started. I've once sent descendants of the Dragon Clan to help them, but they were all rejected, Dragon Emperor Linhe said. He took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, It seems like I have to go to the Phoenix Clan to meet them again. Linhe wanted to say something but hesitated. In the end, he spoke to Jian Wushuang with all his heart. After walking out of the Dragon Clan's forbidden land, Jian Wushuang looked back from high up in the sky. In the end, he left the Wanyi star field with Old Master. Jian Wushuang heaved a long sigh of relief after learning about the ancient secret and the return of the Dragon Clan. With the Dragon Clan's full participation, the high-end battlefields could be pulled back almost instantly. The Divine Power Universe was not the universe of the Divine Life Palace, but the universe of all the people and cultivators. Without the help of other forces, it would be difficult to support the universe alone. After leaving Wanyi Starfield, Jian Wushuang immediately headed to the starfield where the Phoenix Clan was. Since the fall of the Divine Power Universe, the forces of the Void Universe had almost infiltrated more than half of it. From the star level to the Void Warriors, they had begun to seize it crazily. Countless star fields and divine countries had been destroyed, and at the same time, there were many star fields that had fought to the death or surrendered. 2 out of 3 ancient clans had surrendered. How could Jian Wushuang not be angry? Crimson Sky Star Field. It was one of the oldest superstar fields in the Divine Power Universe. It was under the jurisdiction of the Phoenix Clan. Rumors said that the Crimson Sky Star Field had tens of thousands of suns. Under the scorching sun, the Phoenix Clan would undergo the Nirvana Inferno and reach the Supreme Realm. After traveling for more than half a year, Jian Wushuang finally arrived at the Crimson Sky Star Field. Along the way, all the star fields were more or less occupied by the forces of the Void Universe, except for the Phoenix Clan. It was similar to the Dragon Clan, where not even a single Void Master was in sight. As the main sect in the Crimson Sky Star Field, 10 suns were hanging above the star field, emitting scorching flames. Jian Wushuang did not feel uncomfortable at all. He pulled out the Tarot Divine Sword and destroyed the mountains and rivers within 1,000,000 miles of the Crimson Sky, just like he had destroyed the Dragon Clan's Wanyi Star Field. Several phoenixes who had rushed over were all killed by the sword. After taking care of the disciples of the Phoenix Clan, Jian Wushuang strode into the Crimson Sky Star Field. Who dares to break into the Crimson Sky Forbidden Land? In the red sky illuminated by nearly 100 suns, a fire phoenix with a wingspan of nearly 1,000 feet covered the sky and the sun. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and his hand on the hilt of the tarot sword started to tighten. However, the scene that he had imagined did not happen. The huge fire phoenix, carrying the power of the sun, circled above Jian Wushuang's head for a while before transforming into a handsome young man and landing in front of him. Are you people from the Divine Life Palace? The handsome young man looked at Jian Wushuang and said with uncertainty. Jian Wushuang was slightly surprised, but he still nodded. Hearing this, the handsome young man did not say much. He tilted his head and said, Then come with me. Our patriarch has been waiting for your Divine Life Palace for a long time. With that, the handsome young man turned back into a fire phoenix. The divine power of a top supreme expert soared into the sky and turned into a fiery red ribbon that swept into the distance. Although the Divine Life Palace had always been a top force in the Divine Power universe, it had not had much contact with the Dragon, Phoenix, and Qilin clans. The Phoenix clan, which had surrendered to the Void universe, did not mind that Jian Wushuang, the palace master of the Divine Life Palace, had destroyed the star field. Instead, it seemed that they had been waiting for the arrival of the Divine Life Palace, which made Jian Wushuang confused. Without much speculation, Jian Wushuang and Old Master followed the traces left by the Fire Phoenix and plunged into the depths. The further they went, the more suns there were in the sky. When they reached the depths, the entire sky was almost occupied by the suns. There were at least 10,000 of them. Even with Jian Wushuang's divine power, he felt that his throat was dry. When they arrived at the deepest part of the Crimson Sky Star Field, a giant palace that was no smaller than the Dragon Clan's Forbidden Land appeared. At the same time, nearly 1,000 phoenixes were standing on both sides of the palace, as if they were waiting for something. When Jian Wushuang's feet landed on the ground, he felt the scorching heat that could almost evaporate an ordinary supreme. Jian Wushuang naturally looked at the figure of a fire phoenix, which was 1,000 feet long, hovering in front of the giant hall. Swish, a long cry that pierced the clouds resounded, and the 1,000-foot fire phoenix soared into the sky. A total of 10 magnificent tail feathers left behind flowing lights and flames in the sky, which was extremely shocking. With just one flap of its wings, the phoenix was already in front of Jian Wushuang, and the flames flowing on its feathers almost sprayed on him. However, Jian Wushuang did not panic at all. He just looked at it calmly. Swish, the magnificent flame feathers with flowing flames retreated, and an extremely pretty face appeared in Jian Wushuang's eyes. "I say, are you spacing out? Why didn't you dodge? With your strength of a half-invincible supreme realm, aren't you afraid that I'll burn you to ashes?" Although it was a gentle voice, it was full of heroic spirit. Under that pretty face, the most fascinating thing was the extremely hot body half covered by the flame feather coat. "Wear your clothes properly, in case you catch a cold," Jian Wushuang reminded her kindly. The pretty girl was stunned, and then the divine power of fire suddenly rose. "Good, you fellow. I thought you were a fool, but I didn't expect you to actually dare to tease me." Jian Wushuang did not want to waste time talking to her. He said directly, "Go find your patriarch. I have something important to ask him." "What? Are you so shallow to think that I'm not the ancestral matriarch of the Phoenix clan?" The beautiful woman sneered and said. Jian Wushuang was slightly stunned. He had never expected that the patriarch of the Phoenix clan, one of the top ancient clans in the Divine Power universe, would be such a young and beautiful woman. Another stupid guy who has been bewitched by beauty. Are all outsiders so shallow these days? The beautiful woman sighed. "Are you really the ancestral matriarch of the Phoenix clan?" "Naturally," Jian Wushuang sneered. "That's good. I've been looking for you." The tarot sword, which could cut through anything in the world, was unsheathed, and its sharp tip was pointed at the neck of the Phoenix matriarch. In an instant, nearly 100 descendants of the Phoenix clan transformed into a pair of huge wings and surrounded Jian Wushuang. The Phoenix matriarch's eyes narrowed slightly before she calmed down and sneered. "I thought you were a fool, but it turns out that you're a fool. With your half-invincible supreme stage, do you believe that I'll burn you to a crisp?" After that, a huge totem of a phoenix rose from behind the Phoenix matriarch, and the phoenix let out a long cry. "Go back and get the palace master of your Divine Life Palace here before I get angry," she said in a deep voice, her words unquestionable. Jian Wushuang said indifferently, "I am the palace master of the Divine Life Palace." "Just you?" The Phoenix matriarch sniggered. "And you are? If you really are the palace master, then with the strength of the descendants of the Phoenix clan, wouldn't any one of them be able to become the palace master of the Divine Life Palace?" All the Phoenix clan members laughed. "If you're tactful, then quickly scram back and tell your palace master to come see me." She waved her hand and started to look impatient. At this moment, a loud voice was heard. We can't let him go. Matriarch, he's the one who has just invaded and killed 3 of our disciples. All of a sudden, fiery light burst out. The great matriarch of the Phoenix clan was furious. I was wondering why the Crimson Sky Star field was shaking. I thought it was those stupid bastards. It turns out that it was you. You came with bad intentions. Do you want to die? After saying that, the fire phoenix totem floating in the sky opened its mouth and spat out the world-extinguishing flame at Jian Wushuang. Even Jian Wushuang could feel the burning sensation from the half-ancestor-level fire aura. Jian Wushuang did not dare to be careless and directly released the 4th move of the Tarot Sword Manual, 4 Seasons. As a result, the Winter Frost World, which had always been effective, naturally dissipated on the burning ground. The explosive flame hit Jian Wushuang and he was sent flying. With a wave of his hand, Jian Wushuang barely managed to extinguish the flames on his clothes. His face turned serious. If the Phoenix Matriarch had used all her strength in that attack, he would have been seriously injured. In other words, the attack that destroyed the Winter Frost World was less than half of the Phoenix Matriarch's power. Jian Wushuang stopped underestimating his enemy and focused. A red-gold divine pattern slowly appeared and began to flow around his body. Old Master, who had been following behind him silently, raised his eyes slightly when he saw this scene, but he soon calmed down. The Phoenix Matriarch, who was about to criticize Jian Wushuang, turned serious. At the same time, she muttered to herself, "That can't be. This kid is a half-invincible supreme. Why does he give me a sense of danger?" "Humph. You're just pretending." The matriarch snorted coldly and turned into a huge fire phoenix that charged at Jian Wushuang. He opened his golden eyes and an invisible blade formed in his right hand. Then, he swung it down at the matriarch of the Phoenix clan. The sword will spread for millions of miles, overturning the mountains and rivers, and dimming the sun. The Phoenix matriarch's eyes were filled with fear. She suddenly realized that this kid was actually a bastard who was pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. The old Phoenix matriarch came to a sudden stop in midair, and just as she was about to take a step back, she realized in horror that all her escape routes had been blocked by the ever-present sword intent. "Damn bastard!" The Phoenix spoke in the human language. With no other choice, the matriarch of the Phoenix clan raised her head and let out a long cry. Nearly 100 suns trembled at the same time, and the scorching sunlight shone down, turning everything in sight into a sea of fire. The giant fire phoenix endured the pain of being burned in the sea of fire. Swish, a shrill cry pierced through the sky, and the flaming feathers on its body were brilliant and magnificent. Countless streams of light and flames fell to the ground, and a giant phoenix with wings that could cover the sky was born. In the face of the vast sword intent, the giant phoenix, with a huge sun in its mouth, collided with it. The crimson red against the golden light only took an instant, but the newly formed fire domain cracked on a large scale. Not only was the golden sword intent not damaged, but it also accelerated the attack. Matriarch! Nearly 100 Phoenix clan disciples rushed over. However, they were blocked by an invisible barrier the moment they raised their feet. Old Master raised his eyes and paused for a moment with the black scepter in his hand, then fell silent again. Feeling her domain shatter, a sense of helplessness welled up in her heart. The matriarch of the Phoenix clan let out a final cry before closing her eyes. When the vast sword light shattered the last sea of fire, it stopped in front of her with endless power. Time seemed to have stopped. A moment later, all the ice and snow melted, and the sword light disappeared. Jian Wushuang withdrew his palm and said, "Open your eyes. You're not dead." The phoenix's eyes opened slowly. The matriarch of the phoenix race, who had returned to her human form, was still hovering in the air, unable to believe that she was still alive. Jian Wushuang raised his head and saw something he should not be looking at. He quickly looked away. I actually didn't die," the matriarch of the Phoenix clan murmured softly. Then, she looked at Jian Wushuang, who was standing on the ground with his hands behind his back. With a flap of her wings, the matriarch of the Phoenix clan appeared before him. "I said, Why didn't you kill me? She panted slightly, her chest heaving up and down. Jian Wushuang glanced at her and said, I have the ability to kill you, but I can't kill you now. I need to get an answer from you. What answer? Why did you surrender to the void universe? With your power of the half-ancestor realm and your territory, it won't be difficult for you to resist, Jian Wushuang said. The matriarch of the phoenix race was speechless. She pursed her lips and said after a while, If I say that I'm only pretending to surrender, and that I'm using this as an excuse to wait for an opportunity, would you believe me? I would, Jian Wushuang replied with two simple words. The old matriarch of the phoenix race was stunned for a moment before her lips curled up into a beautiful smile. To be able to take on the position of palace master of the Divine Life Palace at such a young age, you are indeed a meticulous person. Jian Wushuang ignored her and continued. Since the Phoenix clan is pretending to surrender, let's go to the off-world battlefield and fight against the enemy together with the Divine Life Palace. No problem. The matriarch of the Phoenix clan was very straightforward. However, she changed the topic immediately and said, However, I want to see if the palace master of the Divine Life Palace has the ability to help the Qilin clan resist the attack of the Void Universe. If you succeed, I can promise that the Phoenix clan will die for the Divine Power Universe. Really? Really? The matriarch of the Phoenix race said firmly. Deal, will set off immediately. Jian Wushuang nodded in agreement and turned around to leave. Looking at the figure that was not sloppy at all, her pair of phoenix eyes slightly narrowed, and then she shouted, Wait for me! You're following us too? In the vast star field, at the bow of the cosmic boat, Jian Wushuang turned to look at the Phoenix matriarch. Of course. We've made a bet, so, of course, I have to follow you and supervise the completion of your side of the bargain, she said leisurely, flames occasionally rising from her long crystal red hair. Jian Wushuang shook his head and did not speak anymore. The dragon, phoenix, and Qilin clans were on par with each other. Each clan occupied the most ancient and perfect star field, and the distance between them was also getting further. Even with the speed of the cosmic boat, it would take at least half a year to reach the star field of the Qilin clan. On the way to the Qilin clan, the various star fields and divine kingdoms had fallen far more quickly than the previous star fields, with less than 1 in 10 remaining. A large number of star-level void masters began to set up camp here, and there were countless star-level void warriors who robbed countless magical treasures and resources. Jian Wushuang was not idle either. As long as he did not delay his journey, he started to kill the void warriors that occupied the various star fields and divine kingdoms in large numbers. As if the coldest divine punishment had descended, he killed countless people with a wave of his hand. Even the 3 and 4 star void masters had no power to resist. As for the matriarch of the Phoenix clan, she was getting more and more apprehensive the more she looked at him. Just where did this fellow come from? He was clearly a half-invincible supreme being, yet his attacks seemed to be at the very top of the hierarchy. Could this fella have obtained the direct teachings of Cosmos God? That was what the matriarch of the Phoenix race thought. Otherwise, how could he have defeated her so easily? The Phoenix clan's matriarch was now at the peak of the half-ancestor realm. Furthermore, she was in her own territory. She was confident that she could take on 2 half-ancestors and retreat with ease. However, Jian Wushuang defeated her, who was at the peak of half-ancestor realm, with only 1 move. She began to look at Jian Wushuang with suspicion and confidence. After a long time of random thoughts, the Phoenix matriarch finally came up with a simple conclusion. No matter what, she could not afford to offend the palace lord of the Divine Life Palace. Rodu Star Field. It was one of the most vast and majestic star fields of the Qilin clan, and also the most unique star field. Outside of Rodu Star Field, there were a total of 6 smaller star fields that formed a circle to protect Rodu. It was said that there was a spring of chaos sealed under Rodu. The Qilin clan had received the Order of the Heavens and had been stationed here since the beginning of the chaos. The star field shattered, and countless corpses of cultivators and void warriors floated in the broken void, filling the cracks with their blood. In front of them, battle cries shook the heavens. The countless void warriors were like a tide that reached the shore, and like a swarm of locusts, they rushed madly towards the star field that had not been broken through for a long time. That was the Qilin clan's Rodu. Another six-scar Void Master shook his arms and blasted a hole in the huge array in front of him. Dozens of one-scar Void Masters took advantage of the situation and swarmed forward, tearing it apart with all their might. The army was formed by tens of thousands of descendants of the Qilin clan, and the seven-colored halo that belonged to the Qilin clan shone on the myriad domain. However, the pitch-black void energy was like a net that covered the entire world, trapping all the divine power within. At the main gate of Rodu Star Field, on the sky-high city wall, an old man in a golden armor, exuding an overbearing divine power, looked at the battlefield. 5 young men in golden armor stood beside the old man. This endless war had been going on for countless years, and nearly half of the descendants of the Qilin clan had died in this war of resistance. On the other hand, those damn void warriors of the void universe were like locusts. They could not be killed all at once, and they had exhausted the Qilin clan's strength. The golden-armored old man's originally spirited eyes had already dimmed. In this isolated and helpless situation, he did not know whether to continue resisting or to surrender. With the announcement of the fall of the divine power universe, all the top forces were either killed or destroyed. The Qilin clan had already reached the end of their ropes. Stubborn members of the Qilin race, listen up. As long as you return to the void universe, we will stop attacking and allow you to continue governing your original star fields. Unnecessary resistance will only accelerate your own destruction. The advice to surrender that was wandering in the broken sky was repeated over and over again. For some reason, the old man was touched today. After a long while, the golden-armored elder slowly closed his eyes. "My sons, what do you think?" The 5 golden-armored young men standing behind him looked at each other and said firmly, "We fight to the last moment. But I want you all to live." The golden-armored old man's face was filled with sorrow. "If we continue to resist like this, the Qilin clan will definitely be exterminated." The few of them looked at each other again, their eyes dimmed. One of the slightly immature golden-armored youths said, "Not necessarily, father. Perhaps we can really hold on until the day Big Brother comes out of seclusion." Hearing this, the golden-armored elder slowly shook his head. The hope that had risen in the depths of his eyes was quickly suppressed. It had been too long, so long that he had almost forgotten that he had another son in seclusion. That heaven's favorite of the Qilin clan was born from the heavens, but he never came out after entering the sealed door when he was at the peak. No one knew if he was dead or alive. The golden-armored elder could not, and did not dare to place his hopes on that illusory thing. Perhaps it was really time to end this. Just as he was about to shout the word surrender, a clear voice suddenly rang out from the broken sky. The flames lit up the sky as a huge fire phoenix rose into the air. Her wings spread out like clouds in the sky, and countless flames fell from her fire feathers. It was like bathing in the flames of the 9 nethers. Even a scar-level Void Master would die instantly if they came into contact with the flames, their intestines and bones rotting. As far as the eye could see, everything was in the middle of the explosion. At the same time, a grand heavenly gate opened on the back of the huge fire phoenix. A golden divine light shone down, and an unimaginable giant finger also descended. Divine might shone, and the sky of the star field was completely shattered. Both the star-level Void Warriors and the scar-level Void Masters looked at the finger that was impossible to avoid and was like a divine punishment with their eyes wide open. Boom, boom, boom. The sky changed color, and the void caved in. Half of the huge army of the void universe was wiped out by the giant finger. Like the dark clouds after the sun appeared, they all dispersed. The sounds of fighting stopped. The remaining Void Warriors and Void Masters who had survived the finger were all frightened out of their wits and began to flee on a large scale. Gulp! All the descendants of the Qilin clan gulped in unison. They were still shocked by the grand heavenly gate. After dispersing the divine power, Jian Wushuang, who was dressed in a black robe, walked in the void. Flap, flap, flap. The fire phoenix rose from behind Jian Wushuang and its eyes were full of fire. Little fellows of the Qilin clan, what are you all standing there for? Shouldn't revenge be the most important thing right now?